May 2025 Investment Committee meeting. Take the roll, please.
Yes, sir. For the Director of Finance, Ms. Peralt.
Present.
For the State Controller, Ms. Gallegos.
Present.
Chairperson Keeley.
Present.
Mr. Tang.
Present.
Ms. Yamamoto.
Here.
Ms. Bradford.
Here.
Ms. Hendricks.
Here.
Mr. Gunning.
Here.
For the State Treasurer, Mr. Rufino.
Present.
For the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ms. Sanders.
Present.
Mr. Juarez.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Would you read that statement into the record, please?
Absolutely. The CalSTRS board meetings are live web streamed, video archived, and available to the public on calstrs.com. Individuals who wish to address the board should wait for the 10-minute public comment period at the end of the agenda item that the speaker wishes to address. For comments not pertaining to a specific agenda item, there will be an opportunity for additional statements at the beginning and end of the open session. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to comment. However, if there is not enough time for each speaker to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. To protect the privacy of speakers under the age of 18 who wish to address the board, only their first name and affiliated organization may be provided, but other personal identifying information, such as their last name, age, or school, may not be shared. Since the March Teachers Retirement Board meeting, CalSTRS received 68 emails, letters, and voicemails from members and non-members who are requesting CalSTRS divest from Tesla. 1 email from a member requesting CalSTRS divest from Musk, Vance, and Trump business interests. 1 email from a non-member requesting CalSTRS divest from Elon Musk's businesses. 3 form emails from members and non-members requesting CalSTRS divest from fossil fuel companies due to the Los Angeles fires. 1 email from the Sierra Club requesting CalSTRS favor shareholder resolutions that support transparency and action on climate and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. So I'd like to just outline what the format will be this morning. We recognize that there are many members of the public that wish to address us this morning. And we are going to be sure that you are heard, and we're going to be sure that you're heard early in our agenda. We would ask that during your comments and while you're present here, that you please respect the presence of being inside our boardroom. It's really important for all of us. You're welcome here. We will hear your input. We will hear your voices. We have staff that you can follow up with. What we can't do is engage in conversations or dialogue or ask you questions and answers. So we ask that you respect where we are and the business that we have to do, just as we're going to show you the respect that you deserve to be heard in this public forum to express your views. I want to thank the public for being here. I want to thank our staff and our consultants for all the work that you have done to prepare us for today's meeting. Our focus this morning is on the cornerstone of our work as fiduciaries and the duty of loyalty. At CalSTRS, that means making decisions solely in the interest of our members, California's educators. It's a responsibility we take seriously, and one demands clarity, discipline, and purpose, especially in these volatile, divisive, and uncertain times. As stewards at CalSTRS Public Pension Fund, we understand the importance of trust, and that trust is built not just on performance, but how we conduct ourselves. And that's why we're committed to staying focused on our mission and our purpose and our members. Our investment practices are based solely as fiduciaries and not on politics. They're grounded in managing risk, return, and focusing on our mission. Our job is to deliver retirement security for our members through thoughtful, prudent, and objective decision-making. We have done that for the last 100 years, and we plan on doing it for the next 100 years. Today's meeting is an opportunity for us to reaffirm that commitment, our focus to our duty as fiduciaries, to transparency, and to the long-term financial health of this fund, and to our members who are counting on us to get this right. But to do so, we must stay vigilant. We must have a laser focus on our mission and our purpose. With that, I'd like to turn to our video and to our reason for our existence. Jonathan?
I was born in Blackfoot, Idaho. I went to college in Oregon, and then I came down to California for grad school at UC Davis. My name is Nicholas Miller, and I'm professor of sociology and the coordinator of the social work and community studies program here at Sacramento City College. And I've been here for 21 years. You know, over the years, I'm proud of so many things I've been involved in here at Sacramento City College. I was able to build a program for formerly incarcerated students that kind of started out of a club initiative. The Re-Emerging Scholars Program, it's a program for currently and formerly incarcerated students here at Sacramento City College. Now we have programs at 50 other colleges around the state. I would have never imagined myself being a teacher. I was outgoing in class, but when it came to like giving presentations, no way. Shaking, holding, you know. But right away, when I got to college, I found some faculty members who like reached out. And that made me feel like it was possible to actually do it. I had that English professor, and then I had a German professor and a political science professor and so on. I wanted to make the impact that they were having on me on others.
Professor Miller is very engaging with his students, and also just brings a new perspective on sociology and kind of like the whole community college curriculum in general.
He's a great professor, and he's very vocal just about being around and being there for you. So I genuinely enjoy the way he teaches and just who he is as a person.
It's actually a really insightful class. He's a very down-to-earth instructor, definitely a relatable person, and he makes it really fun.
I try to be pretty informal. There's probably a different dynamic in a college classroom than maybe in a K-12 classroom. So many of my adult students are actually trying to work and manage families and take classes. And I just feel really lucky that I get to be part of like this adult learning process. Some of my hobbies include gardening. I love gardening. I love just getting in the dirt. Around my yard and around my house, I have a bunch of chickens. They are awesome, and there are babies around our house, and so we love them. She's sweetie. I love yoga. I never thought I would be a yoga guy. I run consistently. The American River here in Sacramento is amazing, and so I go out as much as I can. I found out about CalSTRS and my pension when I got hired by a faculty mentor who told me this was the dream come true system and that if I started my contributions early, that I would never notice them. And it was like the best advice I ever had. Knowing that I have that the stability of a pension makes me feel like there's so much possibility. I'm really looking forward to retirement, to be able to spend time with my kids when they're adults, maybe grandkids, to be able to go travel, to spend more time in my yard, and knowing that my finances are stable in my future retirement, I feel safe, and it makes me feel like all of these dreams are actually possible.
Thank you to the communications team. Always a great way to begin our meeting as to why and who we serve. So thank you. I think we need to formally adopt the agenda for the day, and if we could do so with some flexibility. So it's been moved by Mr. Tang, seconded by Ms. Yamamoto. Without objection, the agenda has been approved with some flexibility. Samantha, how many public comments do we have?
We are currently at 19.
Samantha?
Oh, can you hear me?
I can now, yeah.
Okay, sorry. We're currently at 19.
Okay, so we have, let's round that up to 20, a nice 20. We'll round it up to 20, which is, leaves 1.5 minutes per public speaker. We have adopted standing practices here of how the public comments are heard. So we have, if you can, please limit your comments to 1.5 minutes each. Obviously, you'll have some grace period, but if you start going too far over, I will ask you to finish up your thoughts. So 1.5 minutes each, and we're going to start, Samantha, with those that are present here in the boardroom. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. Who's our first speaker?
Our first speaker will be Ruth.
Okay, Ruth, welcome. And maybe you can call the next speaker so that they can be prepared right after Ruth, and then we can proceed that way, and maybe we'll be a little bit more efficient. Thanks, Samantha. Who's next?
Oh, after Ruth is Edward.
Okay, thanks. So Edward, please be prepared. Ruth, you're on.
Good morning. My name is Ruth Radetsky. I'm a retired teacher from San Francisco Unified. I came here in March to ask you to divest from Tesla, and now I'm back to ask you again. I've been talking with teachers from Sacramento to San Francisco over the last few weeks, and every single one I talked to was appalled to hear that our pension fund had over $1 billion in Tesla stock. We may live in the million nitty-gritty details of our right this minute in our classroom, but we are creating the future of California every day. We don't sleep easy, knowing our pensions are paid for with profits from the apartheid apologist busy slamming doors in our students' faces as fast as he can while he fathers his master race. But I know your fiduciary responsibility means you're not supposed to consider the moral dimensions of the investments you choose for us. Tesla is a terrible investment. Whether he is still officially in charge or not, Doge and everything it does is Elon Musk's baby. Likewise, whether he pays more attention to Tesla or less, whether he is CEO or just the major stockholder, Tesla is Musk and Musk is Tesla, and Musk has done irreparable damage to the brand. Tesla's stock is on the brink of crashing. I'm sure you bought us into Tesla for all the right reasons. Green investments, yay! But it is now apparent that we need to get out, divest from Tesla.
Comment.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Edward,
Who's after
followed
Edward?
by Ralph.
Thank you, Samantha.
My name's Edward Hasbrook. I'm the spouse of a retired teacher and the beneficiary of a CalSTRS pension. When I spoke at your March meeting, I said we'd be back, and we are. I said that there'd be more of us, and there are. And I said we'll keep coming back until CalSTRS sells all of its Tesla stock, and we will. Sometimes divestment presents a choice between ethical and fiduciary responsibilities. Tesla presents no such dilemma. Continuing to hold Tesla stock is as financially ill-advised as it is politically ill-advised. I'm sure your analysts have told you there's no financial basis for Tesla's price-to-earnings ratio. Tesla isn't an electric car stock or a manufacturing stock or a technology stock. It's a meme stock, almost all of the value of which is derived from the cult of personality of its drug-addled delusions of grandeur Nazi CEO, Elon Musk. When Musk's image bubble bursts, as it will, so will the Tesla stock bubble burst. Please sell Tesla now, all of it, while you can still take a profit from what you paid for it. I look forward to not seeing any Tesla on the next report of CalSTRS Holdings when it's released on May 15th, and to being able to come before your next meeting to thank and congratulate you for doing the right thing and the prudent thing by selling Tesla. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Ralph, followed by Michael.
Yeah, hello. My name is Ralph. My retirement job, I teach at a community college. I teach physics. I spent my career as a systems engineer. Let's flash back to 1999. I'm walking into a colleague's office. He's on the phone, and he's talking to his wife. Buy more drcoop.com. Buy more. True story. I don't know how many shares of pets.com he had, but imagine 1999, you had sold pets.com, drcoop.com right at that moment. What a genius move that would have been. And that's where we are with Tesla. What a golden time for you folks to be fiduciary geniuses and sell Tesla. I was a systems engineer, full self-driving. I don't think it's going to work. He has the wrong sensor suite. Doesn't matter. There's not going to be a monopoly in self-driving cars. Waymo is already out there. Sell now and be a genius. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. We will have Michael next, followed by Nathan.
Hi, thank you, Michael Hamilton. CalSTRS retired. This is quite exciting, I must say. It's been stunning to watch the haphazard way Elon Musk has gone about his unelected, unappointed work in the federal government. There's been no rhyme or reason. Elon Musk and Musk-owned companies do not deserve the financial investment support of the California State Teachers Retirement System. Elon Musk does not hold nor share opinions that are in line with educating children. His rhetoric leans divisive, not inclusive. He has recently stated, quote, "The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy." Weakness. Empathy is a weakness. As a teacher, this statement shocks me to my core. It's mind-boggling. Musk has engaged in anti-democratic speech and has threatened the livelihood of educators across America with the idea that the Department of Education should be dissolved. He is anti-union. Lack of oversight of Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has allowed Musk to recommend massive layoffs and firings, support union busting, shut down entire agencies that protect Americans, gut cancer research, root through citizens' private data, and lie about the discoveries of so-called fraud. Meanwhile, Musk's companies keep raking in billions in taxpayer money. We, as teachers, employed and retired, devote our professional lives to educating children. I believe it is quite clear that Elon Musk is not interested, nor does, I'm just about done.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Nathan, followed by Andrea.
And for those of you who don't finish your thoughts, please forward those to our staff members so that they are reflected and they can share them with us electronically. Thank you. If you so choose. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for giving us the time to speak. I'd like to echo what was said by the previous speakers. My name is Nathan. I have been working with the Tesla Takedown Sacramento group, doing protests each week out in front of the Arden showroom. We are there because we believe Elon Musk is a threat to our democracy. He is destroying our federal government. You've heard a lot of good reasons from the previous speakers, and I'd just like to echo all of that. And I think most importantly, we need to send a message that other oligarchs can't come along and do what Elon Musk has just done. Can't take over our government illegally, do unconstitutional stuff, completely wreck what Congress has passed. And I hope this board can take up that message that you are not gonna support oligarchs, and you're not gonna support the stocks that provide their wealth. And as other speakers have said, there are a lot of problems with Tesla. One is just public sentiment at this point. Public sentiment for the cars and for Elon are very much down. Sales are down. And China just invented a much better battery while Elon was off messing up our government. So I think this is the perfect time to sell Tesla stock. I'd encourage you to do that. I think it would send a strong message, but it would also be financially the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Andrea, followed by Lori.
Good morning, board members, and thank you for your service. My name is Andrea Pritchett, and I am a middle school teacher from Berkeley, California. and I'm speaking today as a representative of the CalSTRS Divest campaign. CalSTRS Divest is an organization composed of educators and CalSTRS members from across California. Our goal is to get CalSTRS to divest from entities that enable or facilitate severe violations of human rights and international humanitarian law, such as apartheid, genocide, or illegal occupation, including weapons and military technologies. Our campaign has official endorsements from 10 teacher unions so far, 40 local, state, and national organizations and advocacy groups, and we're just getting started. In addition, the United Teachers of Los Angeles and the California Federation of Teachers have passed resolutions calling on CalSTRS to adopt an ethical investment policy statement. Our goal is for CalSTRS to divest from publicly traded companies that consistently, knowingly, and directly facilitate or enable human rights violations and violations of international law. This is consistent with CalSTRS' commitment to human rights in investments and the UN's guiding principles on business and human rights. We know that CalSTRS' policy is to engage before divesting, and we would like you to use your policies to engage with companies that can be engaged with, identify those which cannot, and divest from them. As educators and people of conscience, we expect the CalSTRS board to serve as ethical stewards of our pension funds. We do not want to retire on profits gained from war crimes or other severe human rights abuses in Gaza or elsewhere. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Lori, followed by Carla.
Hi, my name is Lori Wager. I'm a retired teacher from San Francisco, literacy teacher. I'm also a Jewish person. I'm representing the CalSTRS Divest campaign. I want to highlight just 3 of the companies with sustained violations: Caterpillar, Elbit, and Palantir. Caterpillar has provided militarized armored bulldozers to the Israeli military that routinely used to demolish Palestinian homes, schools, and infrastructure for decades. Since at least 2004, Human Rights Watch has documented the D9's role in violations of the laws of war. Amnesty International found that Caterpillar failed to meet the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. Elbit Systems, Israel's largest weapons manufacturer that we are investing in, supplies munitions, drones, and surveillance systems used by military and police worldwide. Elbit weapons have been repeatedly used against Palestinian civilians. In March 2024, Israel used a 500-pound bomb made by Elbit on an emergency and relief center in Lebanon, killing 7 civilian aid workers. Many assaults like this one have been documented as potential war crimes. Palantir Technologies provides AI-powered surveillance tools to Israel's military and the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Palantir signed a new contract with the Israeli military after several months of bloodshed in Gaza, when the death toll for children had already been in the thousands. Palantir provides software used in raids, deportations, and family separations. These companies are just a few.
Our next speaker will be Carla, followed by Jason.
Good morning. My name is Carla Schick, and I am a retired Jewish teacher who continues to work in California's Hayward Unified School District with new teachers. We call on CalSTRS to join with counties and cities such as Alameda and Hayward to divest from the corporations complicit in the genocide in Gaza. History shows us that CalSTRS divestment from South Africa was instrumental in ending the apartheid regime. CalSTRS' own ESG guidelines demand of us that we follow the time-honored nonviolent strategy of divestment from the weapons and surveillance technology corporations that profit from Israel's genocide against Palestinians. As teachers, we are told that students learn from what we do rather than what we say. After a year and a half of watching a genocide in Gaza, it is no longer sufficient to say that we abhor the genocide. We must do everything in our power to stop this ongoing genocide. As a Jew, I was told over and over again that the Jews were slaughtered because no one came to help us. Not stopping the genocide in Palestine means that we are complicit in this genocide. As a retired teacher, I do want my pension, and I enjoy it. But I hope that the CalSTRS board will engage in meaningful dialogue with us to end our investments in genocide. There is no time to lose as Palestinians are being killed daily. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Jason, followed by Christina.
Good morning, board members. My name is Jason Newman, and I serve as president of the Los Rios College Federation of Teachers, Local 2279 of the American Federation of Teachers. We represent 2,500 faculty, teaching and serving over 60,000 college students in the Sacramento region and our community colleges. Our faculty, including myself, are beneficiaries of the CalSTRS pension system. Our faculty union's executive board, at a meeting held on April 16th, passed a motion calling on CalSTRS to divest from companies that profit from the production of weapons and other industrial products that fuel the ethnic cleansing and military occupations harming millions of innocent people around the world. At previous LRCFT board meetings in 2018 and 2023, our faculty passed resolutions calling on CalSTRS to divest from corporations that aid in the Israeli occupations of Palestine and illegal settlements in Palestinian territories. Numerous educator unions throughout California have also signed on to this divestment campaign. Our statewide affiliate, the California Federation of Teachers, has taken a strong position in support of divestment, as have several CFT locals throughout the state. At its meeting in October of last year, the CFT State Council voted to approve a resolution calling on CFT to work to achieve CalSTRS divestment from companies connected to genocide. Our teachers, like Nicholas Miller, whom you saw earlier in the excellent film clip on Sacramento City College, do not want to be complicit and don't want our pensions to bankroll.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Christina, followed by Sarah.
Good morning. My name is Christina, and I'm a middle school teacher here in California. I'm a member of the California Federation of Teachers, and I've been a CalSTRS member for 10 years, and I'm the only Palestinian teacher in my 800-person local union. I'm grateful to have access to a retirement fund, so thank you for that, but I am distraught that my contributions go to companies enabling the Gaza genocide and the illegal military occupation of the West Bank. I've lost count of the number of videos I've seen of Palestinians running from Israeli snipers and tanks, some of which I happen to be related to. Men screaming the names of people they're searching for who are trapped under the rubble, and children sobbing over the bodies of their mothers and fathers. Did you know that a new term was invented because of this genocide? Wounded child, no surviving family. There are at least 18,000 children who were found wounded and have no family to take care of them because of this genocide. Right now, the entire population of Gaza is at risk of starvation. And did you know that half of the population of Gaza are actually children under the age of 18? As a Palestinian American, I hate that my taxes and my pension funds both sustain the companies that build the bombs that have killed over 60,000 civilians, likely much more than that, destroyed every single school and every single university in Gaza, and killed 18,000 Palestinian children. I'm here today to ask you to meet with me as one of the very few CalSTRS members who are Palestinian, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Sarah, followed by Forrest.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Smith Silverman. I'm Jewish. I'm a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, Sacramento. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and I'm a STRS member. I'm also a parent to a 5-year-old. I fully support the STRS divestment campaign, which calls for divesting our retirement funds from entities that profit from or enable human rights violations, including apartheid, occupation, and genocide. As a Jew, I believe that every life is an entire world, and we have a duty to protect every single human life. Jewish Voice for Peace is campaigning for divestment from Israel bonds, in which STRS is invested. These bonds are direct loans to the Israeli Treasury and War Chest, providing critical support for Israel's apartheid system, forced displacement of Palestinians, illegal settlements, and the genocidal campaign in Gaza. At least 60,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of whom are women and children. 2 million Palestinians have been repeatedly displaced, their homes destroyed, and entire family lines erased. Israel has refused to allow adequate food aid into Gaza. When I look at my child, I think about Palestinian children who don't know if they will survive the night or where their next meal is coming from. And as a teacher, I grieve for Gaza's destroyed universities and students who had the same dreams as my students, to learn and build a better life. Please support divestment.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Forrest.
Thank you. I'm a 7th grade world history teacher in Berkeley. The CalSTRS investment policy for mitigating environmental, social, and governance risk states that you will, quote, discharge your responsibility in a manner that is the sole and exclusive interest in the participants and beneficiaries. Board members, the participants and beneficiaries are unanimously and profoundly opposed to a slew of the corporations and bonds that are bolstered by our money. The purported policy goes on to state, and I quote again, the system's investments impact other facets of the global economy. So we all know that we have a lot of power with these. We're obliged to pay teachers into a treasury of corporations that manufacture weapons. Teachers supporting weapons. We back the world's #1 producer of weapons, Lockheed Martin, and several others to the tune of $577 million. I'm sure it's much more than that, actually. Please get our money out of the weapons industry. I do not want to exchange the liberties of our society for whatever security might be provided by state-run surveillance, and especially from corporations that sell these tools and programs to ICE. That's why I'm also asking you to take our hard-earned money out of Palantir. Israel is breaking international law by expanding Zionist settlements. I'm a Jewish person who does not want to help pay for military-grade tractors that destroy houses and infrastructure. That's why I'm asking you to please divest from Caterpillar. Not only are we opposed to investments in weapons and weaponized machinery, we don't want to support those who supply them, so we're calling on you to also divest from Maersk. I became a history teacher because I believe that education is our best shot at saving the world from humanity's own short-sightedness. More than anything, I dedicate my life to the future of my students. I had no idea that this job would oblige me to fund entities that are diametrically opposed to my own values of love, peace, kindness, and generosity.
That is the conclusion of public comment in person. We are going to move to phone
What is your
comments
first,
now.
what is your first name?
Forrest with
Boris,
one R.
Boris, would you please see that the appropriate staff gets the remainder of your comments and they can be forwarded to us so we can read them?
I appreciate
it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Our first commenter over the phone will be Carol. Carol, go ahead.
Hi. Hi, this is Carol Francis Lycan. I'm a teacher, a retired teacher. I taught for 3 decades in Watts. I'm a member of UTLA and a recipient and a member of CalSTRS. As a woman who has been to the West Bank and to Gaza in 2 different trips, I've seen both the destruction that our government support of Israel and these weapons that are paid for partially by our retirement funds have caused. But I've also seen the courageous nonviolent struggles carried on by Palestinians that are ignored in our communities and in our media. UTLA has overwhelmingly, the House of Representatives passed a divestment
30 seconds.
from, okay, and we want to end the scholasticide, which is the killing of education caused by killing teachers, targeting and killing children, and bombing schools and universities. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Jared. Jared, go ahead.
My name is Jared Gaby Beagle with the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union. I'm calling in today to follow up on the labor risks at Heritage Grocers, a grocery chain owned by Apollo Fund 9, a fund you have invested $300 million in. Heritage Grocers is the parent company of Cardenas Markets in California and Tony's Fresh Markets in Illinois. When I gave comment at your last meeting, I recounted examples of Heritage's workplace management practices that run counter to CalSTRS risk factors, including, quote, specifically the right of association, the right to organize, and collectively bargain, among others. New examples came from management's campaign of intimidation after workers filed for a union election at Tony's Fresh Market in Illinois, including managers invoking fear over immigration status, a particularly concerning message for Heritage, given that both its employees and customers come from immigrant communities. I also updated you on ongoing lawsuits over labor allegations at Cardenas Markets here in California, including 3 sexual harassment cases, 2 wage and hour class actions, and a National Labor
30
Relations
seconds.
Board complaint alleging violations of workers' rights to free association. Heritage's labor practices pose financial risks, litigation risks, brand and reputational risks, especially among immigrant customers, and risks of reduced productivity. We've provided a detailed summary of ththese labor risks to CalSTRS staff to share with you. Today, a worker from Tony's will speak about her experience trying to exercise her right to freedom of association. As Apollo seeks commitments to its new Fund 11, we urge you to seek Apollo's concrete action to resolve Heritage's labor risks.
Thank you for your comment.
Investment before moving forward with any new allocation.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Ophelia.
Buenas
Ophelia, go
tardes.
ahead.
Buenas tardes, yo soy Ofelia Lopez.
My name is Markeisha. I will be translating Ophelia's statement. Hello, my name is Ophelia, and I worked at Tony's Fresh Market in Chicago for 5 years. Tony's is owned by Apollo. When I started at Tony's, the meat manager of my department used his position and was trying to force women to do things sexually for better hours and shifts. This manager pulled down his pants in front of me at work. I was surprised, but my coworkers told me that harassment occurs frequently, and that is a part of the culture at Tony's. I was told that he would be transferred soon, and I needed my job, so I did not speak up. Then another incident occurred in which a different department manager began to stay by my side while I was at work. He wouldn't let me talk to customers. He treated me as if I were his property to control. I reported it to the anonymous hotline. A year passed without anything happening. The harassment continued, and I sent an email to Human Resources. Due to the investigation, the manager put chemicals in my coffee. This really scared me. It wasn't until I filed a police report and a second complaint with the union's help when the company took this seriously. They saw on video what happened and eventually terminated him. This was one of the reasons among many in which the workers at Tony's needed a union. Discrimination, work abuse, manager abuse, sexual harassment, and much
30
more.
seconds.
We filed for our union election February 14th. An organizer came to collect more cards for union support on the 24th, and 2 days later, I was fired. I believe the company fired me because they knew I was organizing and it was effective. It scared a lot of my coworkers to vote against the union. During the election period, we couldn't even talk about unionizing. They told us that the union would ask why they would take money for our Social Security number, and we would be out of a job. Then they told us that a new rule was
Thank you for your comment.
We weren't allowed to speak about anything.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Kathleen. Kathleen, go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the for being able to speak. I am a retired United Teachers Los Angeles House of Rep, and I serve on my retired steering committee for UTLA. And I am here to affirm that the House and the board of UTLA both voted for divestment of all of our investments in companies that consistently and directly profit from, enable, or facilitate human rights violations, violations of international law, prolonged military occupations, apartheid, or genocide, including weapons manufacturers and companies that build technologies such as artificial intelligence and surveillance technology for military use. I must say, as a retired teacher receiving CalSTRS disability benefits, I have lost trust in my fiduciaries that handle the investment. It is not okay to separate one's ethics and morality and not to adhere to international law, to U.S. law, and to follow through with genocide and military occupation. This is not just with Palestine. This has been happening for generations, and we must stop the human cost of war here and abroad. Our veterans also
Thank you for your
from
comment.
this.
Our next speaker will be Wendy. Wendy, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Greenfield. I'm a CalSTRS member who worked in education for 37 years before retiring. I'm wearing a shirt now that I often wore in the classroom that says, "Peace, love, reading." That's what I always wished for my students and for all children. It's terribly painful to know that the retirement funds that send me monthly checks is invested in companies that create the opposite reality for Palestinian children: war, death of loved ones, and no schools for reading. CalSTRS board of directors divest from companies that are causing so much suffering. Gaza's Ministry of Health reports Israeli assaults on Gaza have killed at least 52,500 people in Gaza, with tens of thousands more buried under the rubble or have died because of lack of food or medical treatment. UNICEF says at least 16,000 children have been killed since the beginning of Israel's assault on Gaza, averaging 27 child deaths per day.
30 seconds.
I met a 14-year-old boy from Gaza who had both legs amputated at the hip. Please divest from companies that are making this possible. That is what teachers want. That is what our school communities want. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Matthew. Matthew, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Matthew Cunningham Cook. I'm a consultant with the Office and Professional Employees International Union. I am calling today about CalSTRS's investment in Teleperformance. So CalSTRS holds $57 million in shares in Teleperformance. Teleperformance in sign language interpreters at their U.S. subsidiary, ZP Better Together, have been organizing for over a year for better working conditions on the job and more respect for the deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind communities that ZP serves through the Video Relay Service program. We've had some constructive engagement with CalSTRS so far, and some of our members have spoken at CalSTRS board meetings, but we would really love it if CalSTRS would continue to engage with Teleperformance about labor rights and seek to ensure that Teleperformance fully implements the UNI Global Labor Rights Accord in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Margot. Margot, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Margot?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, one second. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, Margot, go ahead.
Margot,
Okay,
we can
sorry.
hear you.
Good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon. I have been a teacher in San Francisco for over 20 years. I have been very moved by all the speakers calling for divestment, and I want to add my name to that list. I am the daughter and granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. My father escaped as a baby from Berlin, Nazi Germany. And even though he does not like what happened in the past year and a half all around, he calls it a genocide, as do I. And it is our job as educators. We dedicate our lives to nurturing the potential of every child, building a safe, more just future. But how can we stand by those values while our retirement dollars are invested in companies that profit from weapons of war, private prisons, industries driving environmental collapse? Please divest. We do not want our retirement on the back, blood, and lives of families, children. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Sarita. Sarita, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a current high school teacher and CTA member, and I'm just echoing the calls to please sell Tesla stock and do the right thing and prudent thing by divesting from companies that are supporting the genocide in Gaza, perpetuated by Israel. We're in the 9th week of starvation of the people of Gaza, and that's being upheld by Caterpillar, Elbit, Palantir, Maersk. They've destroyed every school and university in Gaza. How can we as educators claim to care about human rights and be committed to our students when our retirement is helping to kill children? In fact, during just the time of this call, a child has most likely been killed in Gaza because a child is killed every 45 minutes by the Israelis in Gaza. CalSTRS is responsible for divesting because of their so-called commitment to human rights.
30 seconds.
And Caterpillar, Elbit, Palantir, Maersk, and Tesla are all involved in the continued surveillance of immigrants, of Palestinians, collaboration with ICE, and these are totally in opposition to what we believe. As far as Tesla goes, Elon Musk's Nazi rhetoric cannot be materially emboldened by our teacher pensions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Sharon. Sharon, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Sharon Siskin. I'm CalSTRS, longtime CalSTRS member, and also a member of the PST union, Peralta Federation of Teachers, for the last 20 years. And I am calling, I've been spending every Saturday going to demonstrations that protest against Tesla. And I found out recently that CalSTRS holds Tesla stock. And I'm appalled because of everything that Elon Musk has been doing to dismantle democracy, to dismantle the Department of Education, to dismantle our social safety nets, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, called a Ponzi scheme. We should not be supporting the enrichment of Elon Musk. We need to sell Tesla stock as a statement that we don't endorse fascism.
30 seconds.
So anyway, thank you for taking this call, and I think a lot of people feel the same way from what I can tell being out on the streets every Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. That is the conclusion of public comment for item 2.
Three things, maybe 4. I believe it's Diane Stanton. Diane, can you just stand and identify yourself? And those of you who are here today, Diane is the direct contact for follow-up on your comments. Pretty easy to access her. And as we've said to our team, and we say to the public, if our team is not accessible to you, that's an issue for this board. This team will be accessible to you. They will hear from you, they will engage with you, they will talk with you, and they will report back to us. So please, she's terrific. She's been with us a long time. She does a great job. She's your person, okay? Secondly, we have a great team that facilitated all of those public comments seamlessly. We thank them. Third, I want to thank you for honoring the request to limit your comments to 1.5 minutes each on such a sensitive, numerous sensitive, deeply emotional, and very important topics that are important to all of us that you brought to us today. And I thank you for respecting that. And finally, I would just say this. Those issues that you've brought before us and those that we've been wrestling with for a long time, for us to make any types of decision in our council and our fiduciary council and people that guide us, these decisions don't happen overnight. They won't happen next week. We can't move that quickly. That does not mean we are not thinking about issues that you are bringing before us. That does not mean we're not being advised in appropriately so in closed session, and some of which is in open session. So just because you don't see a visible action immediately does not mean your comments, your concerns are falling on deaf ears. They are not. On the other hand, that does not mean we're always going to get to the same place that you ask us to get to. And that's not necessarily because we all don't agree with some of your concerns, but we have restrictions. So this all takes a lot of time. It's a big, big organization with lots of legal issues that we have to wrestle with. policy issues, financial issues. And these issues obviously are important to you, and they're important to all of us. And I want to thank you deeply for respecting this room and how you conducted yourselves and brought your concerns to us. You're a model for how to do that. So thank you for that. With that, we'll take a 5-minute break, and we're going to come back and we'll hear from our CIO. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we're going to move right to our CIO's report, and at the end of Scott's report, we'll be breaking for lunch. So, Scott, we're going to turn to you.
Great. Good afternoon, members of the Investment Committee. The agenda for the CIO report is broken out into 2 parts. Part 1 is portfolio positioning and portfolio resiliency. So I'll be speaking, and Makita will be speaking on that topic. Part 2 is celebrating 1 trailblazer and 2 retirees. So that's our agenda today. And let me just start with this concept of portfolio resiliency. I know Steve likes analogies, but the best analogy I can think of in describing this environment and the policies that have been communicated is opening Pandora's box. In pursuing a mix of protectionist tariffs, international disengagement, including global security, and a transactional approach to alliances and diplomacy, many times with an adversarial approach, the administration has risked opening a geopolitical Pandora's box. Many risks that we'd never thought were imaginable are seemingly possible, all of which could lead to a series of destabilizing effects that may spiral, and from fractured alliances to global market shocks. Like Pandora's box, I would say opening it is unleashing unintended and some unpredictable consequences, in the very extreme, undermining some of the pillars of global stability. I believe there's still time to close this box, but whether we're able to close Pandora's box or whether it remains open, I just want to make sure you know that there have always been 4 keys to our success in navigating any environment. And so in this slide, you can see before you that in the long term, we've been successful in achieving our mission and goals. And so I look at the 30-year, 8.07%, 23 basis points of alpha. And I just want to make the point that our plan includes recessions. It includes crises. And these are a critical part of our scenario analysis. You'll hear from Makita about those scenarios. In the recent past, we've weathered the 2000 tech bubble, 2008, great financial crisis, and the 2020 global pandemic. And with our plan and with our capabilities to navigate these crises, combined with our plan for full funding, the teachers' benefits are secure. Let me just say that one more time. The teachers' benefits are secure. But there have always been 4 keys to our success in navigating any environment. Let me just talk briefly about those and how we're positioning ourselves today. The first key is diversification and disciplined rebalancing. It's important that we stay the course with diversification being the most important pillar of our success. And I just want to call out that it hasn't mattered very much in the recent past, but it's going to matter a lot in the future as we experience more volatility. You can see, let me just flip forward, in this slide that we are the most diversified we've been across our whole evolution of time. And we're diversified across asset classes and geographies and sectors and companies. But given the risks around this upcoming storm, I'll begin to talk about the new and emerging risks to consider. And the question is, where will we may need greater diversification, right? We flip forward a couple. The second key is cash and liquidity. When there's a recession or crisis, cash is as good as gold, and we need liquidity to both mitigate risks and rebalance the portfolio. We need liquidity to pursue opportunities and be able to buy assets when they're down 30, 40, 50%. So you can see in this slide that we have been raising cash and it's on the higher end of what we typically hold, even if you were to go back a decade. In addition, we spent time expanding our liquidity tools and formalizing a leverage policy. So again, we're about as good a position that we've ever been in historically that we are in today. Let me just move to the third key, which is dynamic asset allocation. Every crisis is different, whether it be the overexuberance of the tech bubble, a credit crisis in 08, a global pandemic, and because each time it is different. It's very important that as the crisis unfolds, the team will need to identify the new and emerging risks and mitigate them where possible, but also capture the new opportunities. What we've done recently, let me go back a slide, is we shifted the portfolio to a defensive position by selling global equities to an underweight position. That's in the gold line. And we moved our diversifying portfolio that performs better in difficult periods from an underweight position to a target position. Marked in red, you can see that the last time we did that was during the COVID period. We've raised the bar in the returns that we require in the private markets, and what that's meant is it's slowed our pacing down. But we've slowed down with the market because the markets are not transacting as much these days either. The fourth key is our team and partners. If you think about the team, it's the underwriting skill for every transaction we do. And when I started, I think there were like 115 investment staff. Today, there's 258. The average age is 44. It's a very experienced staff. And in the end, I want you to think about that our portfolio is an aggregation of all these deals and transactions and assets that we buy collectively as a team. And you have a team of experts that is looking at every asset, creating a price and a value for that, and making sure that in any market, we are hopefully paying the best price across our history. That's definitely been the case. And of course, we're leveraging our partners, world-class partners, for all of their insights. We have these four keys. I think they're going to continue to be the keys for our success going forward. But let me just say that if Pandora's box remains open, then this environment can be both unprecedented and world-changing. And I think that the most important thing for us to do now, our board, our consultants, our staff, our partners, is to come together to assess all the potential risks and opportunities to prepare and plan across all of these dimensions to ensure we have the most resilient portfolio in navigating this environment. We need to make sure we have the most resilient portfolio to navigate this environment. And so before I go on to talk about the risks and opportunities, which I want to spend some time in doing in this particular environment, I just want to pause here to see if there are any comments or questions in this introduction.
I don't see any, Scott. So, oh yeah, I'm sorry, Steve. You're in the,
just a quick question. Just so with the increase in our liquidity, where are we putting that money? How do we invest it in any event, knowing that we want to draw from it at some point to be opportunistic? Where are we getting it, or where do we put it?
And so as we've been reducing our equity position, we originally were going to start to shift that, and as part of our allocation plan to diversify more into things like infrastructure and energy transition, power, et cetera. We've started to slow that pacing, so we're in fact holding more cash at the time. And then of course we deployed some of that capital to increase the diversifying elements of our portfolio, fixed income in particular. So but we're waiting, I think, for a better time to transact. It's either got to be a great price with, or we have to have a lot more clarity on the environment to act, I think.
But if I might, the holding area, is it CDs? Is it banks? Is it, so that we can draw? Where are we putting that money for the time being?
Yeah, they're all, it's mainly short-term securities that are, backed by our government or
that are safe as can be, yet we're still earning something on them.
Yes, and that something actually is higher than typical, right? Because if we remember the zero rates, I'm looking back to see Rosie, four something.
Yeah,
4.5.
You're kidding me. Or on a short-term basis?
4.5%.
Wow. That's great. Almost keep it there for whatever.
I'd like us to earn more, but it's not, it's not a horrible
I
situation.
appreciate the response.
Okay, Scott, back to you.
All right, so let me just talk a little bit about our risks. Despite our strong history of success, our strong team, and our processes, I want to talk about the most important risks in assessing whether our portfolio is prepared to weather this new storm. And so risk number one is, to me, again, deglobalization and tariffs. I draw an analogy that if you're driving a car at 150 miles per hour and you do a 90-degree turn, what do you risk? You risk flipping that car, right? So if we're trying to change deglobalization one day, of course, too quickly, you get higher inflation, lower GDP, a potential recession, and maybe a potential short bout of stagflation. If it's gradual and orderly, if you make that turn at 25 miles per hour, of course, this can be handled in a much different way. So that's risk number two. Risk number one. Risk number two to me is time. I feel that there's not much time now to get back on course before a recession might be inevitable. So tariffs are triggering the type of uncertainty that makes it difficult for businesses to spend, to hire. And we've seen dramatic decreases in shipping product to the United States. That's slowed significantly. So at this point, we need clarity, not only clarity in the tariff policy, but I think we quickly need the two other elements that have been discussed. One is tax cuts, and the second, deregulation. And the mistiming of that, I think, is not, that time period is not our friend, because the longer the economy is in this state of uncertainty, you're de facto going to slow down and move into recession. The third risk, and here's a new one, I'm going to flip towards it. I want to talk a little bit about this slide, because I do think it's a new and emerging risk. And if you think about the iPhone, I'm trying to separate kind of the quality of the product and the price of the product. So if you think about the iPhone, it's arguably the best in class of its product, right? But if the price moved from $1,000 to $4,000, would you continue to buy that iPhone, or would you possibly think of a Samsung? I feel it's hard for me to say that because I'm an iPhone fan. But what I'm talking about is the concept of U.S. exceptionalism, right? So I still believe that the U.S. is going to be the largest financial market in the world. We have a lead in technology and AI and pharma, et cetera. We're going to continue to have probably the most world-class companies in the world. U.S. dollar is going to be a reserve currency for some time. But even though I don't think any of these things will change, the real question is what premium or price will you pay for that? So if you look at this chart, just looking at the U.S. market cap to GDP versus the world, we're almost 3 times the value of other stock markets, if you will. And you can even see in the last 2 decades, that line looks pretty vertical. And so will there be capital flows outside of the United States? And here's the chart. This is the growth of international holdings in the United States. I think one of the unintended risks and consequences of the Pandora's box around tariffs is what I call the Match.com of trading partners, right? So if we're encouraging people not to trade with the United States, they may well not trade with the United States, and they may trade with each other. That could lead to them needing less US dollar assets of all kinds. And so if you looked at how much their foreign ownership, just in the last couple of decades, we've gone, or just even the recent past, if I look towards 2020 to where we are today, we've gone to about 12 trillion to about 27 trillion, right? A huge increase. So you might say, well, what's behind those foreign holdings? If we were to break it out, guess who owns the most US assets? Well, the most significant owners are our most significant trading partners, right? So there's a growing and new risk that this might be reshaped, obviously. And the question for us is, do we need greater diversification? Because we are very focused on U.S. assets, even though we're geographically diversified. So, but I also want to pause here because as this is a new and emerging risk, and you looked at these charts and said, wow, you know, I can draw the lines to where this might be headed. I want to pause here because with many of these emerging risks, like this potential flow of capital, the direction is not validated with certainty. The speed of the shift is unknown if the direction does go in that direction. And the magnitude of the shift is also unknown. So I don't think there's time to act today because there's too much uncertainty. But we have to assess these potential new risks. To me, this time period, it's about preparation, it's about planning. So if we know with certainty that in this circumstance, capital flows are moving away from the US at a rapid speed and in tremendous scale, we have a plan to act at that time. I'm afraid to say that my fourth risk is the deficit, because usually that's closer to number one, but the extension of tax cuts is a little bit of a catch-22 because while it'll be positive for the economy in the short term, it's likely to increase the deficit. And with that, structurally higher interest rates over the long term, with the possibility of some volatility around that, depending on the supply and demand of treasuries. With over 36 trillion in debt and heading to over 7% of our GDP, it has to go down, right? We're really moving in an unsustainable direction. So let me just say I have another risk, but I'll spare you the details because there's so many to go through. And let me just talk about opportunities, because portfolio resiliency, it's not just about the risks, it's about pursuing opportunities. And so we've talked a lot about this in the past, but AI, infrastructure, energy transition, power, private credit, all of these opportunities, all these themes are most likely getting even more interesting in this environment. If we think about bringing back manufacturing to the US and other developed nations, and we're going to be discussing all these topics in the July offsite. So I'll kind of defer talking about some of these themes there. But I want to conclude with two pillars of investing. The first is that fortune favors the prepared mind. And the second is long-term investing is about patience and discipline. Because in the end, there are less times to act as an investor than there are times to wait. And we as humans with emotions always want to act, but our emotions can get us to act at the very wrong time. So this weekend, I know some of you were at Milken. I was at Milken, it was very busy, but I was able to catch some of Berkshire Hathaway's annual meeting. And Warren Buffett is holding a massive amount of cash. He and that team, they're not waiting around doing nothing. They are scouring the earth literally for the best companies in the world. And when the price falls, they're going to spend all of that cash. They're going to buy companies with high conviction. Similarly, I want us at CalSTRS to be preparing and planning now with our asset allocation, a prepared mind. And then we wait. Investing is about patience and discipline, so that when we see confirmation of the risks, confirmation of the opportunities through the team and our partners, as I discussed, we will be ready then to act. I wanted to frame our discussion today on this concept of portfolio resiliency. I'm asking all of my staff, all of our partners, is CalSTRS portfolio resilient enough to withstand the new storms ahead? And I see this discussion that we're having today as just a starting point for us with you, the investment committee, because we should be asking this question and educating ourselves, preparing and planning. So I'll pause here to take more questions before Makina runs through the scenarios.
Thank you very much, Scott. Any questions?
Take a breath.
I don't see any. So we're going to turn it over to Steve and Alan. and look forward to your comments. Thank you for your very thoughtful CIO report, Scott.
Great. Thanks. So on the theme of preparedness, what we wanted to sort of highlight to the committee in open session is every few years when you do your asset allocation review broadly, as part of the process, we review with your staff and with you risks and scenarios that could potentially happen in the capital markets and potentially impact your portfolio. These scenarios take a couple of different forms. One relates to historical experiences that have actually happened. How would different asset allocation policies have behaved in a repeat of the global financial crisis in 2008 and 9? How would the portfolios have behaved during the stagflationary period of 1973-74? If you recall, there's about a dozen historical experiences that we go through. And part of doing that is so that you're identifying an asset allocation that is resilient, as Scott said. It won't be resilient, perfectly resilient in every market, but it will be adopted in the context of all the possible risks that have happened historically. The second form of scenarios that we do are forward-looking. These are stress tests. How would asset allocation policies and your portfolio behave in the context of interest rates going up by 100 basis points, 200 basis points, 400 basis points? If credit spreads increased by 400 basis points, a wide variety of possible stresses in the capital markets. These stresses reflect not necessarily things that have happened in the past, but things that could happen in the future, because nobody here knows exactly what the future holds for us. One of those stresses that we've included in scenarios historically has been around a collapse of global trade. Not specifically the tariff policies that are in front of us today, but global trade has been a risk factor in the economies for a long time. So you as a committee review those types of scenarios and analysis when you adopt your asset allocation, which I think is both a best practice and also highlights, to Scott's point, the importance of resiliency in a portfolio. The final thing I want to add, and I'll hand it over to Alan for a couple of comments as well. What makes the current environment challenging, and frankly makes most environments challenging, is we haven't been through historically exactly what we're going through now. At the highest level, the biggest uncertainty is what the strategy is behind tariffs. Tariffs are a tactic, they're not a strategy. And markets, every week decide the strategy is something different. The one possible strategy around tariffs is a way to creatively raise tax revenues to support the tax bill. May not have much to do about global trade and balance of payments across countries. On the other extreme, tariffs are a strategy, part of a bigger strategy to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and improve U.S. industrial production. That's a decade-long strategy with lots of changes to industries that could be disruptive. But standing here today, we don't know. We don't know what the strategy really is. And the market doesn't know, and the market's sort of grasping for clarity around that, which is why it's going down and up, quite a bit each day. We'll all find out together over time what the strategy will be. But one thing that is noteworthy and worth highlighting is the tariff strategy does seem to bring with it a shift in fiscal policy in the country away from perpetual deficit spending to one that at least aims to control federal deficits. And that's important for the markets because for almost every year for the last 50 years, we've run government deficits in recent years, increasing ones. Those are very expansionary to the economy. And if there's a desire to run fiscal balances that are more normalized over time, maybe not fully balanced, but more normal, particularly in the context of a monetary policy that isn't as dovish as it's been for the last 4 or 5 years, if not longer. That serves as a bit of a wet blanket for the markets. So there's lots of things to consider. Your staff is on top of all of these issues, and we wanted to highlight primarily for the board that the types of risks that you're feeling today are addressed as part of your normal practices and procedures. Alan?
I'll try to be brief. For the record, Alan Emkin, Makita, but people talk about uncertainty. Uncertainty is far too simple a word. What we are is in a period that's unprecedented. We're in a period where the global world order since World War II is in flux. And it could be really good. It could be really bad. It might not be much change, but no one knows. And that, in and of itself, is what is rattling both the politics and the capital markets on a global basis. It's unprecedented. There's no frame of reference. And it's very hard to make long-term decisions when you don't have a base of information that you're comfortable with. That's number one. Number two, and I think this is really important, and I hadn't planned on talking about this, but since Scott raised it, I feel an obligation. You know me, I can't help myself sometimes. He mentioned 30 years of great performance. So what I did a quick lookup. The average yield on Treasury bonds in 1995, 30 years ago, was 6.6%. So you were compounding in the least risky part of your portfolio at 200 basis points a year higher than you are right now, which presents a headwind to have a replication of that sort of return. So it's just important to remember, you have to know where you are to look forward. So there's a headwind. And the last thing, and this is very personal, and this is really strange. So Scott said the average age of his staff was 44. My daughter's 44. And so, you want to talk about feeling old today? Scott managed to do that. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks,
That was
Alan.
by accident, Alan. Sorry.
Yeah.
Don't see anyone in the queue, and I know there's some, there's a couple of recognitions that we're going to do before we break. And I really appreciated your report today, Scott and Steve and Alan, your comments. And I had a breakfast with someone who I really have grown to admire on Saturday. And often when I'm with him, I kind of feel inadequate. I'm like, this guy's really smart and he has a lot of wisdom. He's very accomplished. But I also love the way he rolls. He's got a great vibe about him. And he asked me, Harry, have you ever heard of Daniel Kahneman? And I said, no. He said, well, he shared with me why he was asking me. And he forwarded me a Wall Street Journal article about him. And to your point, he talked about, and he won a Nobel Prize or something, but he introduced and he wrote a book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. I think you captured it. Now is the time to think slowly. That often when we think fast as human beings, it's based on emotions. And often those decisions are not necessarily turn out the way we like them to be. It seems like this is a good time for us to be thinking slowly. So I thought it was appropriate to think fast and thinking slow. So with that, back to you.
Well, now we've got some great celebrations because I've got one trailblazer and 2 retirements. And so let me just start with our trailblazer, Margot Worth. During the first week of March, 3 members, including her in the private equity team, Catherine Rudada and Amanda Coleman, attended an annual Women's Private Equity Summit, where 1,200 women were in attendance. And I'm thrilled to announce that at that conference, Margot Worth, our very own Margot Worth, our director of private equity, won the Trailblazer Award. And I think this is impressive. I just want to tell you what it says. The award honors and recognizes one industry titan, or titaness, for exceptional achievement in private equity. So Margot Worth, our trailblazer and industry titan.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. And the controller was there. That was pretty neat. And I got to be interviewed for about 45 minutes with another industry titaness, Andrea Auerbach from Cambridge, who is here with us. So thank you, Andrea.
All right. Well, I am both happy and sad to announce a couple of gentlemen who are sitting in what we call the splash zone. Stephen Tong, our Director of Risk Mitigating Strategies, and Mike DeRay, the Senior Investment Director of Private Markets, have decided to retire. I'm not approving that, but they're retiring anyways. I'm happy for them and their future retirement, but I'm going to miss them greatly. And I'd like to say a few words for both individuals. So starting with Stephen Tong. Stephen, I don't think he supersedes Alan, but he is the longest tenured employee at CalSTRS with over 40 years of experience. And by the time he retires, I believe it'll be 41. A fun fact, Stephen started out in the investment accounting unit in 1984. Wow. I call Stephen the Babe Ruth of CalSTRS because Babe Ruth, if you remember, he started out as one of the best pitchers in the major league. And then he became, history making, probably one of the most famous home run hitters. Stephen has made a huge impact at CalSTRS in multiple positions. Similarly, he was a director for CalSTRS for 27 years, director of internal equities, where he helped us to first invest directly. Think about the collaborative model. He was one of the OGs. He was the director of innovation and risk, where he helped to incubate and innovate many of our important investments, including risk mitigating strategies, where he ended up being the director of risk mitigating strategies, where he grew it to its target weight over time. I'd say beside his impact, Stephen stands out because of his character. He's shared with me his values, his faith in God, and I can tell you, he's a man that lives those values out every day. I could always count on Stephen to respect, help others. And in times of stress, he was a calm, cool, collected, very objective. And most importantly, he was dedicated to high quality work. More often than not, I'd be shutting my lights off and I'd walk over to Stephen's office, and guess what? He was still there. He was there year after year for over 40 years. So let me now move to Mike. Mike joined CalSTRS in 2000 as the real estate director when the group only had 4 people. Think about that. That's crazy to me. $2 billion in assets in real estate. And while Stephen was one of the OGs of the collaborative model, Mike further defined that model by innovating and expanding into JVs and real estate operating companies, really creating a lot of value for CalSTRS, building the core. But in the end of his time in real estate, the vast majority of what we did is we controlled our holdings directly. So I was very grateful for Mike to spearhead all these innovations. It was a lot of work because Mike was pushing the boundaries. So I found it only fitting that he took that role on as a senior investment director, and all the private markets folks are now pushing him into new areas. Mike hired and mentored and trained the next generation of real estate leadership and professionals until, of course, he was promoted in 2023 to oversee $130 billion of assets as the senior investment director of private markets. I'm really grateful he took on that role. He pioneered the position alongside his counterpart, Geraldine Jimenez, and helped me to lead the entire branch as a member of the senior management team. But let me just share a few secrets about Mike that you may not know. Despite his tough negotiating exterior, which I think he got from real estate, if you actually spend time with Mike to get to know him, he's really just a lovable character. And to me, not a lot of people know Mike, I guess, with that laugh. But character, yeah, character. He's been the heart and soul of my leadership team. Why? Because Mike has a very unique talent in building connections, which strengthen the whole team. Few people can take a tense group of arguing directors and at the right moment lighten the mood at the very time. He's really helped me to motivate and deal with tricky issues around people. He's regularly helped the team get what I call unstuck. When we're debating and everyone's sort of on the wrong side, whether it's his levity, his optimism, or his ability to influence the team. So let me just say that Stephen and Mike had uniquely different characters. But one thing they shared is a strength of character that shaped CalSTRS in the right directions. And let me simply conclude by saying that these two gentlemen have had a profound impact on CalSTRS results, our culture, our staff, and even the industry. So please join me in congratulating Stephen and Tom.
So before, I think, Scott, before we ask Stephen and Mike to say a few words if they so choose, I know we have a couple of comments from members of the board, but I do believe there's a member of the public that is online. Is that correct, Samantha? Are they still there?
That is correct.
Okay, so why don't we recognize the member from the public first? There's one speaker, is that correct?
That's one speaker. Correct.
Okay, why don't you bring in the speaker and then we'll hear from our colleagues on the board.
Okay, our speaker is Roy. Roy, go ahead.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Roy March, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Eastville Secured, and I'm very honored to be able to make a few comments about Mike DeRay. As someone who grew up in South Sacramento and a proud product of our public schools, Luther Burbank Titans, go Titans, I know firsthand how powerful it is when someone dedicates their career to serving others with integrity and purpose. And no one embodies that better than Mike DeRay. I've known Mike for close to 30 years. 7 or so years he worked with PERS, is where I originally met him, and for the last 2 decades at CalSTRS. And he has been has had a deep commitment to the people who matter most, the beneficiaries of CalSTRS, his colleagues, the broader industry, and above all, his unbelievable commitment to his family. And while Scott's shared the numbers, it's really not the numbers themselves that I think capture Mike's legacy. At his core, he's a truth seeker, someone who's constantly pursuing what's fair and right, even when it was not the easy path. And in our industry, we have a lot of characters, needless to say, but his integrity really set a standard that inspired those around him. His commitment and leadership, not only within the state pension fund community, but the broader global investment community, has been remarkable. Some of the things that he and I worked on, initiating the pension real estate Association Foundation, which was a mission to advance the interests and values of institutional real estate community and being able to bring opportunities for people from all backgrounds to access and excel in our industry, which was really underserved. And he has been a mentor to so many by nurturing the next generation of leaders with patience and wisdom. And on a lighter note, which I've enjoyed sharing with him, there's a place that some of you might know, the Pancake Circus in downtown Sacramento, which in my childhood was a place of a great delight. It was the big event in my house, birthdays and all. And we would meet there for early morning meetings, sometimes
30 seconds.
with Timmy. And those gatherings were more than just pancakes. They were about camaraderie, shared goals, values, and his unique ability to make everyone feel valued. So, Mike, your contributions have left an indelible mark, not only in CalSTRS, but the broader world. And we will miss your leadership, but we know that your legacy is in excellent hands, given the mentorship and leadership that you've ultimately shared. And I honor you. You're a leader, a mentor, and a great, great friend. And I hope your retirement is filled with all that you hope it to be. And of course, plenty of pancakes, hopefully, together.
Thank you so much for calling in, Roy. Thank you. So we're going to turn to Mr. Ruffino, who is representing State Treasurer Fiona Ma. Mr. Ruffino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the State Treasurer resolution I'm privileged to present to both our retirees, starting with Stephen Tong. And I will not read all the whereas. Much has been said in the interest of time and in the interest of going to eat. But I do want to read the now, so there's whereas, and now therefore be it resolved that I, Fiona Ma, Treasurer of the State of California, sincerely applaud, commend, and congratulate Stephen Tong on his retirement and express my appreciation and gratitude for his extraordinary leadership, commitment to excellence, and tremendous service to the California State Teachers Retirement System and to the people of the state of California. I join with his colleagues, family, and friends in wishing him much success and prosperity in all of his future endeavors. Presented today on the 7th day of May, 2025. So I will read quickly also for Mr. Ray, and then I will present them on behalf of the Treasurer. So, Mr. Ray, whereas, now therefore be resolved that I, Fiona Ma, Treasurer of the State of California, sincerely applaud, commend, and congratulate Michael D. Ray on his retirement and express my appreciation and gratitude for his extraordinary leadership, commitment to excellence, and tremendous service to both the California Public Employee Retirement System and the California State Teachers Retirement System, and to the people of the state of California. I join with his colleagues, family, and friends in wishing him much success and prosperity on all his future endeavors. So I'm going to come down and then I can present it to each.
And thank you, Mr. Ruffino. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, sir. And we have a very modest gift from the board for the two of you, and Karen Yamamoto and Ken Tang will present those.
Okay, we're going to go down as well. Okay. So on behalf of the board, we want to thank you so much, and we appreciate your commitment to officers and the members of our organization, and just so much appreciation that goes out.
So on behalf of the board, we just want to thank you for your dedication and for all your hard work over the years to secure a dignified retirement for us teachers. And we just want to present you with this gift on behalf of the board. So.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from Stephen and Michael if you'd like to address us. And Stephen, come on up. I would like for you to sit up here at the dais with us, but I think I'd probably be, they'll tell me, no, you can't do that. So come on up, Stephen, come up here, right over here. Come on up. And as Stephen's coming up, I was very new to the board and I was at an event in Arizona. I didn't even know where the restrooms were at CalSTRS, and Stephen was there. And Stephen reached out to me and said, would you join me at this meeting today? And this is who I'm meeting with, and this is what we'll be talking about. I'd love to have you accompany me at that meeting. Says it all, Stephen. You're a gentleman.
Mr. Chair, I still remember the first time I met you at a conference, and I met your wife at that time as well as your family, the little girl. So I'll never forget that time. And I've gotten to know you over the years. But I just want to talk a little bit about how did I last 41 years here. It's actually 41, I can say that that's official. I think going back to what Scott said earlier about faith, and that's been really my foundation of how I stood up this 40 plus years. And not only my faith, but also my wife, who I've been married to for 43 years now. And so my wife's commitment to just supporting me all these years has really been my foundation. Because as you know, this job can be, is really tough, it's really difficult. And the commitment that we have to make in order to do a good job, it takes a toll at us on times. But without your faith and without your support of your important others, I would say that I couldn't have survived. But I want to thank you for all the kind retirement wishes that have been expressed by the treasurer, by Scott, and by the board. And Mr. Chair, thank you. I've been inspired by my father's example to serve others and guided by a desire to lead with integrity and purpose. It's been an honor to work on behalf of California's public educators. The journey and accomplishments were only not made possible by the dedicated and talented people I work with in the investment office, but also by the essential support from our legal, HR, and technology, and then many other parts of the CalSTRS system. And I could say that truly it's a team that extends beyond the investment office. And so without the entire support of the organization, what we do, what I was able to accomplish would not be possible. I'm also deeply grateful to our external partners, and those are our advisors and managers. I'll just share one key secret to my success, or I don't want to say my success, but how I was able to do the work, is that I always try to connect with thought leaders, with either advisors such as Makita, and managers that are our partners. And so anytime that I had a situation where I needed another opinion, I would go to these thought individuals just to get a different opinion. And through all the different relationships and all the partnerships that I've formed, it's really helped me be able to do my work and try to do the best that we can for the pension fund and serving the teachers. Thank you all for just being a part of this meaningful chapter. And I'm looking forward to my new chapter. The question always arises, well, what are you going to do? And how are you going to spend your time? And for me, the answer I always come to is family. And I just became a grandfather in July of last year, and my granddaughter will be 1 year old on July the 31st. And that's where I choose to spend my time, and I will do so in the future, and watching her, see her grow. Thank you very much.
And just quickly, as Mike's going to share a few comments, just just two sides of the coin. I was new to the board, and I called Mike and I said, Mike, I have a meeting with this gentleman by the name of John, and as you know, they manage a lot of capital on our behalf. He said, when you see him, tell him I thought it was a value add strategy. When are we going to get the value in the ad?
Thank you. My eloquence and my time served is well short of what Stephen has done. I don't want to repeat the very thank yous that he did, but it would be the same thing. The colleagues here, I would say, and working here has been actually a fairly joyful experience. Obviously, it's an honor and privilege to work for the Teachers of California. The chairs that we're allowed to sit in make us a lot more important than we are, and it really is a privilege to do it. And using that chair to what in real estate I used to always say, just do what's right by the real estate, has been wonderful. And having worked on the other side of the house in the private industry, it is great to work for CalSTRS, and the people that work here are going to carry it on well. There was a lot of talk, there's always been a lot of talk about the culture here and the connectivity that they have with each other here. Having worked also at PERS, I don't think there's any other organization. I think STRS is a lot more congenial place to work, a lot more friendly. And I'm not saying anything bad about PERS, but I also think from even compare it to other pension funds that, I've seen from time to time, it's just, and it's carried on. And I think that comes down from the board. The curiosity that comes from the board, the allocation of responsibility that comes from the board is significantly different, and it's carried through, and always has carried through to the team here. Again, I also am looking forward to my time. Again, it pales in comparison. If my wife can put up with me next year, then I'll celebrate. We'll celebrate our 40th anniversary in 2026, and I hope to have grandchildren as well. Many of you know that I do have an autistic son. He's an adult now, and I hope to spend some time in that area and seeing what we can do in the community and for autistic adults and children and some of the charities that are around here. So I look forward to doing that and spending time with family. I'm blessed to have my parents that are still alive at this time, and go for walks and spend time with them as well. So thank you very much. I'm overwhelmed with the appreciation and somewhat embarrassed, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my comment will be brief. When I was served on the board the first time around in 2017, and I saw Mike and saw his name, I thought he'd adopted Director of Real Estate for DeRay. I wasn't sure where he got that name from, but it seemed to make perfect sense, and it turned out very well for you, so thanks.
That's a nice way for us to break for lunch. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you after lunch. We're gonna do a picture. We'd like to do a picture with Steve and the retirees and the committee. So if we could do that here.
And Harry, when do you want to return?
When we come back at 1:15. Oh, 2:15. 2:15. The next item on our agenda, which is the item 3, which is the net zero strategy. And it's a conversation with Bridgewater Associates and Kirsty Jenkinson, Brian Rice, and representatives. Kirsty's going to be joining, she's coming out now. So come on up. And Daniel Hochman from Bridgewater and Associates. Welcome. I think Kirsty's joining us now. Yeah, she's on her way. And this item is slated for 30 minutes with some Q&A. Daniel and Brian, Kirsty, I think what we'd like to do is get some introductions, and then we'll turn it over to you and go through your presentation, and we'll take comments at the end. So we won't take comments throughout the presentation, but towards the end. So Kirsty, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our guest, and to Brian.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Kirsty Jenkinson, your Director of Sustainable Investment and Stewardship Strategies. I'm joined here today by Brian Rice from CalSTRS, and also by our special guest speaker today, Daniel Hochman from Bridgewater Associates. I'll let them introduce themselves as we get into it, but just to give you a little bit of a flow of how we hope this session will go. We're sort of billing this as a little bit of a special two-parter, first with Dan, and then with Brian. And the intention of this item is to present our annual update on our progress on the investment branch's commitment and the board's pledge to achieve a net zero emissions portfolio by 2050 or sooner. An important reminder, I think it's really important as we start this topic, just to remind ourselves that where this pledge comes from and what its purpose is. It comes directly from one of our 9 core investment beliefs, that the investment risks associated with climate change and the related economic transition are going to pose risks and opportunities that we need to focus on for the value of the CalSTRS portfolio. I think as our speakers are going to continue to remind us during today's discussion, all of our activities are focused on managing risk and creating returns for the benefit of California's educators. I think, unfortunately, as we've always said, the path to a global net zero emissions aligned economy and portfolio, whilst it's obviously essential, it's always going to be challenging and it was always going to be complex. And I think this certainly is the reality that we're all facing right now, which is why we thought a good way actually to frame the discussion today would be to bring in one of CalSTRS' trusted thought partners focused on providing sort of global macroeconomic insights and understanding markets. And that's why we're so happy that Daniel from Bridgewater is here today. You'll hopefully have been able to read a little bit more about him and about Bridgewater in your agenda packet. So I'm not going to take any more time doing that. But Dan's going to give you an update on the state of the transition. Very grateful for you being here. We hope to have some questions, if that's all right, afterwards. And maybe before we segue to the second part of the presentation, which will be Brian, who'll be focusing a little bit more on our progress within CalSTRS. But to start with, I'll introduce Dan. Dan, thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. And welcome, Daniel. Mr. Hochman, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. As Kirsty said, my name is Daniel Hochman. I'm the head of sustainability research at Bridgewater. We've spent considerable time and resource to deeply study the topic of climate change and energy transition from a macroeconomic vantage point, what we call tracking the transition. I view this as one of the most consequential topics of the 21st century for the world and for investors. The world is not on track, not yet on track. I believe addressing it requires careful research, thoughtful risk-taking, and active decision-making. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak today on this critical topic and for trusting us to manage assets on behalf of the teachers of the state of California. CalSTRS is a highly valued client and strategic partner for Bridgewater. We appreciate the thought partnership with your investment team and your broader organization, and I'm honored to be here. As top-level observations on energy transition and decarbonization, first, what is different? We are shifting into a different world where the tension and trade-offs regarding the energy transition have increased. Economic competitiveness and energy security are increasing priorities alongside climate leadership, leading to less policy support for climate technologies, especially those that are not yet economical, and a shift in the enabling macroeconomic backdrop of the past years, near 0% interest rates and a less globalized economy. All of this is leading to a slowdown in the pace of the transition and decarbonization. Thank you. What remains the same Energy transition is one of the key secular and generational dynamics of the 21st century, driving shifts in trillions of dollars of capital, a frontier of technology, an area of critical relevance in geopolitics and national strategy, a critical issue for humanity, and a major risk to and opportunity for investors. The key implication for investors is that a passive approach which follows the playbook of the past, namely holding market cap portfolios, is unlikely to achieve either decarbonization goals, like portfolio emission reduction, or financial goals, like avoiding physical and transitional risks. In other words, this is and remains a risk to portfolio resiliency, as Scott discussed earlier. Yesterday, in a conversation with the investment staff, there was a quote on the wall in one of your offices here at CalSTRS from John Muir, which says, when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. I think that's particularly true as pertains to energy transition, as it is attached to technology, capital, politics, and geopolitics, company strategy and financials, and investment returns and risks, and underscores the difficulty of going through this space well. With that, perhaps I'll go into the presentation, which draws on insights we've published in the Bridgewater Daily Observation, our flagship research publication. As Alan said earlier, you have to know where you stand to move forward. So that'll be what I'll try to do, is to share where at least I see us standing. At the highest level, I think there are two dynamics at play, or two risks. There are physical risks. What we mean by this is long-term damages from the physical risks of climate change to existing portfolios. These increase as emissions increase and increase over time. Rising temperatures, wildfires, and storms threaten existing assets. Consider directly the impact on PG&E from the recent devastating Los Angeles wildfires. And transition risks, what we mean is risks from change. The energy transition is enormous and unprecedented in its speed and scale, and that rewiring will create disruption and risk for high-emitting incumbent sectors, think stranded coal assets, or also for companies that attempt to transition too quickly before it can be done in an economic manner. These are not binary and can happen simultaneously, or can be distributed unequally, as in more physical risk in places that are already hot, and more transition risk in other sectors, incumbent high-emitting areas, for example. In the past year, we've shifted away from the transition risk and towards more physical risk. In terms of how the table is set, we see it as more energy addition than energy transition. The left-hand chart here shows the global production of energy. Global energy production is at all-time highs. In other words, the supply of and demand for power globally is the highest it's ever been. Increasing energy tends to also correlate with human flourishing and wealth. We've seen a huge increase in renewables, as you can see in the orange line, but also in other sources of power, including coal globally, which is mostly from China. And that leaves the global stock of power at about 85% fossil fuel. The second chart shows global investment. Clean energy investment has surpassed fossil fuel investment for the first time in 2021 or maybe 2020. But consider that in level terms, we've had 100 or 150 years of building up fossil fuel power assets and infrastructure. This has just tipped for the first time in recent years. And as a result, greenhouse gas emissions are at all-time highs on the right-hand chart. We are well behind any reasonable net zero target. We show a dot here for the 1.5 degree Paris compatible scenario. And this is quite different by country. Actually, in the US and Europe, greenhouse gas emissions are declining. In China, it is increasing rapidly, which is about 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions compared to about 20% of global GDP. Some of this is related to the energy mix. As I mentioned, China is a major user of coal, but some of it is also related to the industrial mix. The US and Europe have outsourced much of their heavy emission manufacturing to other parts of the world. So in short, the transition is not on track. The world ahead is unlikely to look like the world we have known. In this grid, we show some of the major cyclical and secular drivers of investment returns. And what you can see is that for the past 40 years, there was a backdrop that by and large supported investment returns for global investors. You can see that with a lot of green, 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, 2010, and most everyone's lived experience. This is shifting in key ways across almost all fronts. This is shifting in terms of cyclical drivers like growth, inflation, and liquidity and central bank policy. It's also shifting secularly, increasing geopolitical risk, decreasing globalization, a challenging business backdrop, the energy backdrop, which is now focused on transition and physical risk to a degree, and a massive disruptive technology in artificial intelligence. And so it's key to understand each of these pieces and how they each affect and shape the others. For example, the massive and rapid energy needs of AI are likely to lead to more natural gas power in the near term, but major tech companies are also significant and meaningful players committed to the energy transition, so they're related. So for investors, we think it's critical to understand the energy transition dynamic as well as the other interplaying dynamics. The biggest shift in recent years is that the trade-offs for climate leadership at the policy level have become more acute, and as a result, the policy backdrop has become less supportive. We see a pull between three different areas: industrial competitiveness, who will gain market share; energy security, who has stable and secure energy; and climate leadership, who is shaping the future of technology and policy on this issue. Europe, having prioritized climate extensively, is now facing a series of very hard trade-offs around energy security, post the Russia invasion, and industrial competitiveness, for example, as addressed in the Draghi report. Having been leaders in the EV transition, European automakers, for example, now face intense competition from China on one side and tariffs in the US on the other. The US is prioritizing an all-of-the-above energy dominance strategy, focused on industrial competitiveness and energy security, a big shift from the prior administration's focus on climate leadership. And China is roughly balanced in their approach, critical in renewable supply chains like solar panels, but in terms of energy security are also the world's largest user of coal and have limited energy and oil resources. This can feel at times like a massive problem and an enormous problem, but it's actually reasonably concentrated. The chart on the left-hand side shows the key high-emitting sectors. These 11 sectors are responsible for 60% of all global emissions and 90% of all corporate emissions, but only about 30% of market capitalization. So it's a fairly constrained problem. They're the sectors with the most likely transition risk and are most critical in decarbonization. And there's a wide range of credibility and in terms of the transition paths. Consider in transportation the difference between the maturity of electric vehicles, we all see them on the roads, and that of sustainable aviation fuel, which remains a good concept, but not yet meaningfully implemented at scale. The technology roadmap for decarbonization is also reasonably clear. Which technologies are needed? There are many different frameworks for looking at this. This is one that we've developed in some of our research. And the key challenge is that while it's known which technologies are needed, the central issue is there is a difference between what is economical today and what is not. What we show in green here are technologies that we assess to already be mature and economical. If these were scaled completely, we think it could decarbonize about 50% of the of current carbon emissions. These are technologies: solar, onshore wind, nuclear power, electric vehicles, and so forth. But what that means is that there are still 50% of needed technologies where the economics don't make sense today. That's what's in yellow and red. The biggest implication, and in a way how this all comes together, is that with the changing environment, there is now a laser focus on what makes economic sense today. Emerging climate technologies that are not yet competitive are receiving less policy support, and priorities have shifted. So it is a less hospitable environment for those technologies that need more time to develop. The technologies that are economical, that are cost competitive with fossil fuels, are scaling massively. Solar power is the best example of this, but also nuclear, electrification of transportation, onshore wind, batteries, and others. I think carbon capture, and more specifically direct air capture, is a great example of the challenge. It's a critical technology for decarbonization, for buying time for the transition, and could easily be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, in theory. But at present, it's expensive, and scalable and viable business models aren't well established. You can see that in 2024, on the right-hand chart, there was a stark divergence. Capital went into economical and mature technology, and essentially went out of immature technology. A second and critical part of the economic viability question is macroeconomics. Much of what happens and much of what drives clean technology is not only about the underlying tech, but is also about the enabling environment. For example, interest rates, clean technology are long duration capital intensive assets, supply chains, which is particularly relevant in a deglobalizing world, oil or direct carbon prices, for example, what is the relevant cost of the competing technology, or capital availability and liquidity, for example, the volume and price of investment lending. As a result, investing successfully through the transition means also understanding how the broader world is changing. In other words, the preconditions and context that enables the transition to happen, such as interest rates, supply chains, oil prices, and capital availability, and the returns for investors will be a function of how these concepts come together. I think the last 5 years are a great real-world round turn case study of those two dynamics. Starting in 2020, clean technology companies, which are in blue here, were priced at fairly low PEs, something like 7% implied earnings growth. Over the following several years, 2020 and 2021 and 2022, low interest rates, supporting monetary policy, enthusiasm about the policy backdrop, the IRA and the Green New Deal in Europe, and improvements in technology drove investor enthusiasm. Investors began to expect very rapid growth in earnings in the future. And you can see in those years, clean tech was one of the best performing segments in the market, outperforming the global index, which is in red. By 2022, clean technology then had high PEs, something like 20% implied earnings growth, and were pricing a very rapid and a very profitable transition. Over the following 2 years, reality hit, interest rates rose, supply chains were challenged, real-world issues like interconnectivity and permitting caused delays and cost increases, political tensions and pushback emerged, and margins and earnings compressed. The sector fell out of favor for investors, and investors began to expect less rapid growth in earnings in the future. In those years, clean tech was one of the worst performing segments in the market. Now, where we stand today, we're back to fairly low PEs and back to about 7% implied earnings growth. So a full round turn over the 5 years. Interestingly, throughout this period, renewable power increased all over the world. For investors, returns are driven by earnings, not sales, and discounting into the future. So much of the experience in this example is a function of changes in the investor outlook, changes in investor pricing, and changes in investor enthusiasm. And second, changes in the macroeconomic backdrop. And third, and the smallest of the three dynamics in driving the returns for investors, changes in the pace of the actual transition. This is a narrow example, but I hope brings to life the interconnected dynamics and the interplay between the thematic drivers and what actually impacts investor returns. So what does this matter for investors? So what? For investors, I think there is a central tension. Given the picture above, on one hand, in the next few years, we would expect a slower energy transition globally, and therefore a slower decarbonization of the market portfolio going forward. The world is not on track. The past several years for investors have in a way been easy because market portfolios have fallen in carbon intensity, so there hasn't been much tension between the traditional approach to investing and achieving decarbonization goals. I expect this tension to increase as, for example, fossil fuel and overall power needs increase, policy support slow, the macro environment has gotten less favorable, political pressures increase, but also, and perhaps less intuitively, if carbon-intensive manufacturing shifts from China back to the US, or if low-emitting IT companies reduce their share of index concentration. As a result, holding a passive, market cap-weighted portfolio creates real risks to achieving portfolio-level emission reduction targets. In other words, if investors hold a portfolio representative of the world's financial assets, and the world moves slowly on decarbonization, the portfolio will likely move similarly. So that's a challenge on one hand. On the other hand, taking an active posture on sustainability, for example, changing allocations from market portfolios, aggressively reducing carbon footprints, increasing allocations to clean tech investment, is likely to lead to deviation or tracking error from benchmarks, sometimes leading to outperformance, sometimes leading to underperformance. Or said differently, passively allocating to a thematic approach creates real risk to financial goals, as we saw in the clean tech case over the past 5 years. In other words, and in essence, looking different and being worse, I think, is the central challenge. So it's hard on both sides. In the middle is essentially what I think is the challenge and the opportunity for investors, which is how to achieve both decarbonization goals and financial goals. And we think that path requires investors to take an active approach on both sides. These are not easy decisions with easy solutions. Active decision-making contains risk as it contains opportunity. More specifically, that means designing a portfolio to achieve decarbonization goals. For example, being thoughtful in allocation to capital for investments that are well-positioned for the physical impacts of climate change and the transitional impacts of the energy transition ahead of us. That's not necessarily the same as the market cap portfolio. And second, an active approach to achieving financial goals, meaning being thoughtful in allocating capital to investments that are well-positioned for the economic and financial world ahead. We spoke with the investment staff yesterday. In a portfolio context, these two sides are deeply related to each other and need to be designed in relation to each other. We're shifting into a different and in many ways unprecedented world on climate and are not on track to avoid the worst risks. So the implication for investors is that a passive approach, which follows the playbook of the past, holding the market cap portfolio, is unlikely to achieve either decarbonization goals like portfolio emission reduction or financial goals like avoiding physical and transitional risks. Thank you very much.
Any questions? I see Ms. Hendricks. Sharon.
Thanks, Daniel. That's a lot to process. I think if I was a kid sitting in this boardroom right now, I'd be pretty bummed out. I mean, I'm bummed out as an adult, but just thinking about the slowness of the transition, it's heartening, I guess, to hear. I appreciate getting the truth, and but it's, yeah, and I think we've just obviously seen what's happening in our own country around this transition, and it's just, yeah, it's like how many fires, how many floods, how many do we need to have to acknowledge that we need to address these issues in the financial sector. But my question is around, you were talking about kind of, so I get the concept of we're sort of in between these two spaces. It sounds like you're pointing to actively designed portfolio as the sweet spot of the place that we want to consider and contemplate as an investment team. When I hear, and so I want to make sure I'm understanding. So when you've been using the word active a lot, active design portfolio, active decision making. And so I think you kind of tend to go back to the old school, like active investing. And we know, active investing can be costly. And so I just wondered, we tend to be passively invested for the most part. And so I just want to make sure I understand when you use that language of like an actively designed portfolio, what do you mean by actively designed?
I think the central challenge is that really, if you, let's say, hold the market weight portfolio, that can be in public markets or in private markets, that's making a certain set of assumptions about where the world will go. I think that's as true on decarbonization as it is on financial. On the decarbonization side, you get the decarbonization of the companies in the market portfolio. And on the financial side, you get the pricing and discounting that's in those names. Right now, you have 25, 30% in IT companies that's expecting a certain future. What I mean by that is holding that allocation or some allocation that looks like that is, with the world not being aligned to a net zero future, it's unlikely that the portfolio that essentially holds the world's assets will be aligned to the net zero future. And more specifically, I think that tension hasn't been acute in the past number of years, which is that holding, and we went through this with the investment team yesterday, that holding a passive portfolio has decarbonized. I think it's interesting that that has been the case for some reasons that are sensible and some reasons that I think are somewhat unusual. For example, 30% of the market is in low-emitting IT companies. I think that that can give the illusion that that approach is yielding, in a way, results, and I expect the tension to be greater going forward as the decarbonization slows. And so back to your question of what I mean by active decision-making is being active both on which securities and assets are aligned with the decarbonization and your goals on the decarbonization or any investor's goals on the decarbonization, as well as dealing with the active risk that comes from being different in that way. And so it's challenge on both sides. Looking different and investing differently yields actual risk.
Mr. Gunny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Daniel, thank you. And I think you've answered this, but political risk, the current climate, pun intended, we're in now. Do you have a recommendation given where we are now, or a thought?
I think the question really comes back to economics, which is in any investment, the question is it a good investment? And there's all manner of risks that can come along with that. But I think that as it pertains to clean technology or really any other investment, the question comes down to, is that a good investment? And so to me, the critical distinction on clean technology is politics aside, there's some clean technology where the economics clears and makes good sense. And there's others where the economics are not there yet. And I think that's the real bifurcation that you're seeing in the world right now. Politics aside, solar panels are continuing to get built out all over the world. It makes a lot of sense to do so. But one cannot will climate technology that perhaps would be great for the world into existence if the economics don't make sense.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, I don't see any questions. We'll go to Brian.
Going to do a little bit of an introduction, but thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Scott.
Great, yeah, thank you. And I want to thank again Daniel and Bridgewater for their insights. And I think it's going to be difficult, obviously, as we look to our pledge, given the disconnect that's going on in the world. And so we have to face that, and that's something that we're discussing today. Let's move on to part B. Brian is going to report to the investment committee on the progress that we've made towards our net zero goals over the past year. And I want to highlight something that was already said, but most importantly and central to our net zero pledge is our fiduciary duty to our members and our 7% annualized return goal. And that alone takes precedent. So that's to say that our decisions and what we've made so far in terms of investments and will make in the future must be additive to our long-term value creation and the management of our risks. So this item demonstrates our fiduciary duty in three ways. The first is measuring and reducing emissions by steadily building out emissions measurement capabilities and implementing emissions reduction strategies. Number two, it's investing in low carbon solutions, which you see across the portfolio and we try to highlight. And third, it's engaging portfolio companies to understand their net zero ambitions or collaborating with external parties to align goals and expectations. So with that being said, I'd love to hand it over to Brian Rice.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everybody. For the record, I'm Brian Rice, Portfolio Manager, Sustainable Investments and Stewardship Strategies. So yes, this item 3B is the staff update on progress we've made implementing the CalSTRS Net Zero Pledge. The materials that are in this item are largely the continuation of initiatives that we presented to the committee before. I think I said last year we've entered a phase where the phrase "we continue to" will be heard a lot. We've laid the foundation, we've built the governance structure, we've identified strategies, and now we're implementing those strategies. As has been said previously, staff recognizes that the current investment environment makes it very challenging for investors who are looking to take steps or are taking steps to manage climate change risk. However, decarbonization trends continue across global markets. The transition to a net zero economy is continuing. So our net zero pledge remains a strategic priority. The strategies that we're implementing, they position the portfolio to outperform over the long term. It's important that we make progress staff feels that the item that we presented to you is rather long, but represents, the work that we've done and the progress that we've made. And we're very pleased with that. And I think, again, the level of progress is reflected in this slide. So again, the pledge is built on 3 pillars: managing and reducing portfolio emissions. We call that the emissions pillar. Accelerating the global shift to a net zero economy, that's using our influence to do that. So that's the influence pillar. And then increasing investments in low carbon solutions. We call that the investment pillar. So why do we think the emissions pillar is important? As global markets continue to transition to net zero, carbon exposure presents increasing risk. We need to understand that risk exposure. We need to manage that. Wanting to pull out a few highlights, I think, what we've been able to accomplish, I would point to the global equities team. They've been able to reduce their portfolio emissions by over 16% and do that in a risk-controlled fashion. I would also give a shout out to the real estate team. In terms of measurement, I think a year ago they had about 50% of their assets being measured. Now they're almost at 100%. Looking again at the influence pillar, why is that important? We've said this before, there's aspects of the pledge we can control. The investments that we make, the partners that we choose, but there's also aspects of the pledge we can't control. Corporate responses to climate change, policy and regulatory responses. We think we need to use our influence and to engage with market participants, articulate the investment risks that climate change presents and the importance of risk management. Again, to pull out a few highlights, I think the SIS stewardship team is doing a really great job engaging high emitters in our portfolio. Particularly, I think our methane campaign has been very successful. And staff continues to engage across the asset classes with our external partners, really working to align our net zero goals with theirs. And then finally, looking at the investment pillar, the net zero transition provides really interesting opportunities for investors. These are opportunities that meet the risk return needs that we have. They support our net zero pledge goals, and they provide real carbon reduction. So again, pulling out some highlights, I think I would point to the SIS private portfolio. Since inception, it has almost $3 billion now in commitments in low carbon solutions. And I also call out the strong cross-unit collaboration that continues, which really underpins and supports that portfolio build out. As I mentioned at the outset, there are a lot of challenges. So kind of what are the big challenges that we're seeing across the pillars? I think the emissions challenge continues to be data. The availability and the quality of data. We need good data to manage risk, identify opportunities, and take actions. Data quality and availability is getting better, but it continues to be a challenge. Looking at the influence pillar, the big challenge, navigating the current political and regulatory environment. I think more than ever, we need to continue to be very clear in what the value proposition is behind what we're asking. Whether we're talking to companies, working with managers, or advocating for policy or regulatory change. And then under the investment pillar, the challenge, it's around establishing definitions of low carbon assets and assets that help in the transition to a low carbon economy. We want to get more exposure to those, but we want to do it in a way that's consistent across asset classes. So coming up with what we think is a common definition is important, and then applying that definition to the assets that we have and the assets that we're considering investing in is challenging. And then finally, focusing on pledge priorities going forward. On the emissions pillar, continuing to analyze and consider emissions reduction strategies. Again, a shout out to the Global Equity team. They completed the 20% allocation to the Low Carbon Target Index. Right now, they're taking a step back and doing a landscaping of what are the current emissions reduction strategies in the listed equity space, looking at what our peers are doing, what managers are offering, what might be appropriate for CalSTRS. And we're also going to continue to grow the asset base that we measure, focusing private equity and inflation sensitive. In terms of our influence priorities, it continues to be engaging high emitters. continue to focus on the strategies, the priorities that staff presented to you in the January Investment Committee meeting and that we've reinforced here in this item. Engaging high emitters, engaging companies on methane capture. The investment pillar, the priority, continues to be growing exposure to low carbon solutions. Growing exposure to investments, risk appropriate, additive to our total fund return goals, and support the net zero pledge. And we think this will largely come from the CIS private portfolio build out. So I just kind of want to, in closing, just reemphasize staff very much recognizes we're operating in a challenging environment. But climate change continues to present significant risk to the portfolio, and it's our job to manage risk. And we believe the net zero pledge supports long-term management of these risks. It allows us to consider appropriate risk-adjusted investments, positions the investment portfolio to outperform over the long term, and all of this aligns with our fiduciary duty to our members. So thank you. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Brian. Steve?
Yeah, I have two questions and they're related. So first of all, you talk about this three-pronged approach. Are there synergies that can go from one to the other where we're basically catalyzing what we're doing, say, on investments, and how that affects our influence or how that affects our gauging what's actually happening in the portfolio? Are there things that we can learn from one strategy that can be applied across the board?
Yes, I think so. I think if you look at, say, the investment pillar, one of the things we do advocate for is companies to be adopting different technologies, to be making different shifts. And one of the things that we can do is share the examples that are the experiences that we had in the investment pillar. So we're advocating for growing exposure to these solutions. We're investing in these solutions. We're seeing the successes, and we can share that with the companies that we engage with. When we're advocating for them. So we're walking the walk, and that helps us to talk the talk.
Sure. And related to that, and you may have answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are there things we can leverage with, and I'm thinking in particular in the areas where we're trying to influence, that we can go to them and saying, you do this, and you do it right, and we're able to do something because of that, or you're able to benefit because of that.
Well, yeah, I think that comes back to what I said about the value proposition. Being very clear with companies that if you take our advice, I think the methane engagement is a good example. If you take a little bit of time, a reasonable amount of capital, understand where you're losing methane. This is a product that you sell. Don't let it escape into the atmosphere. Capture it, sell it, increase your revenues, be a better, environmental steward. Arguments like that. Efficiency is another good argument that we, engagement that we do. It makes sense to spend, relatively speaking, a little bit of money to reduce your energy costs. In the future, you save a lot of money.
Yeah, let me end just last follow-up. So that to the extent that we're already invested with companies and we're trying to measure their carbon output and everything else, is there an opportunity for us to leverage that by saying, for future investments, we may choose to look at your performance as a rationale for whether or not we want to invest in you in the future? Is that or is that too coercive? I would just ask the question.
I think it's possible, but a lot of what we do in terms of the influence supports our index holdings, our index investment.
Yeah.
I do think you can make the argument with companies that you'll have better revenues, you'll be a better environmental steward, you'll be more attractive to investors, you might be able to make it into certain indexes, and certainly that there are advantages that way of doing, of listening to what we ask them to do.
Yeah, but we're one of those additional investors. So to the extent that they do right by us, who knows? We maybe do right by them.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just add a little, if I can get my little caveat to that. I think we have to be a little bit careful there in terms of, what we're trying to do is mesh between what Dan was obviously explaining in terms of the challenge that we face. And we don't want to be all doom and gloom because we've given a pretty profound picture of the challenges we face. But I do want to sort of say that I think this is the time for us now more than ever there are many things that are very economic because of just unit economics. That is where we will see the greatest opportunity, both to create investment returns and also to have the greatest influence with companies. This is not all about there is no hope and there is no future, but it is about being very tactical in where we spend our time and our energy, both from kind of how we influence companies and also where we invest. And that's what we're spending a lot of time focusing on right now. And that's what's really important in this current environment.
Sharon and then Frank.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sharon and then Frank.
It's okay, we're taking turns. We're taking turns. Look at us. Thank you, Brian. And I was curious about metrics and data, and if there's a way, do we have actual like data that demonstrates what you just, we're missing. Can you go back to the other, or I guess I could go, yeah. Do we have data that we can share? Just because I know there's a big conversation around how is CalSTRS decarbonizing our portfolio. And I just wonder how and when we might be able to kind of externally share more hard numbers. Because I think when we say we're moving in the right direction, I understand all of that, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of be able to, like when we say grow percentage of assets being measured, you know, having some numbers attributed to that so we can demonstrate through metrics and data that we are in fact doing what we say we're doing.
I think we can do that.
Okay.
It's not something that we've done formally or published. We've been more focused on specific asset classes and their emissions changes. In this case, year over year.
Yeah.
I think it could be a bit challenging in that
Sure.
some asset classes we're measuring the whole portfolio.
Yep.
Some asset classes it's part of it. Again,
I
going
didn't
back to
say
sort
it'd
of
be easy, but I just wonder, like, when we say we're shifting, you know what I'm saying? Like, we use language that I totally understand, but it's like, how much are we shifting? Can we kind of get a better scale of that? Not for us as a board, but maybe for folks who are looking at how we are decarbonizing.
I think that's
Does
something
make
that
sense?
we're ultimately trying to work towards. When we get better data, we're able to do better analytics.
Yep.
We're come up with better results and feel more comfortable, disclosing.
Yeah.
I think certainly with the goal being to, decrease emissions across the portfolio, having a sort of a portfolio level perspective of emissions is important. And that's something that we're working towards.
Perfect.
Sharon, may I add just to that? I think and I'll be quite candid here. I think it's really hard and misplaced to try and think of one headline number.
Right.
I don't think that's the right way to both kind of manage the assets correctly and for the asset classes to think about it. I think the more granular approach we've tried to take on asset class by asset class, it's very specific. And I think hopefully the materials show that there's an awful lot of detail and specific numbers by asset class in how they're thinking about this. And I think I'm much more comfortable working on that level because it feels a lot more meaningful. And so I think that it is very hard to aggregate into a headline number around this issue, much as it would be nice to do so.
Yes, and I mean, you're the expert, so I defer to you. I just, again,
One of the things though is because I have my own, I make my own CIO cheat sheet, and maybe it's about organizing into these three verticals and having that sort of cheat sheet, because I think I know what Sharon's saying too, because it's hard for me to look across all the asset classes and I actually just aggregate it into a handy one pager. So maybe we can chat a little bit, and a lot of the information is there, I think, but it's maybe a matter of summarizing it in a way that is quickly digestible.
Quickly digestible, not a headline number, not at all, but just, again, more data or numbers that help kind of get a frame around how we're progressing, I think could be helpful. And then I think the only other question I have is around engagement and how, when we talk about engaging with the highest emitters and external partners, when we engage, then I would love at some point, not now, obviously, but like at some point, I'd love to hear more. I know we have in the past at different investment committee meetings, but just kind of hear how that cycle goes through. So we engage with the highest emitters. What do they say to us? Like, what are some examples of what they say to us? if they say, well, we're doing what we're doing, then what does the CalSTRS staff say back to that? You know, I would love to get a little more flavor for the engagement process, that cycle. Again, not to put it all in one basket, but just to give some examples so that we have a sense of maybe when we engage with emitters who are responsive and engage with emitters that are not responsive. It might be interesting to hear some of those case studies.
Take that back and
Certainly the engagements in action that comes out quarterly, I agree, sort of gives us sort of a point in case for where we try and detail a lot of our engagement already. But I think what you're asking for is a little bit more of the cycle of it. And that's certainly, I know the stewardship team do on an annual basis as well, but we can certainly, refine that.
Frank and then Karen.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
And we've been talking about data, so I've got a quick question, and this may be for Daniel as well. But given the evolving carbon accounting methodologies, how confident are you or Bridgewater in the current data inputs used to model net zero alignment and risk exposure?
I think I would say the data is good enough to work with, but not perfect. And that's not dissimilar from other challenging macroeconomic or really microeconomic spaces. There's been actually enormous work done by many companies to disclose information. I mean, it's amazing. I think 80% of all companies have a net zero transition plan. That's actually rather remarkable. And so the data is good but imperfect. There are real challenges. I would highlight Scope 3 data as a major challenge, meaning kind of upstream and downstream carbon emission data. So not perfect, but I think with good thought and wrestling and good partners, teammates, it's enough to work with. So I would say humility, but enough to bring a picture together.
Got it. And a quick follow-up. Earlier, you made reference to the Draghi report. And I'm not sure if there is any value in taking a look. I'm not familiar with that report, and I'm sure we can maybe Google it, or maybe you can provide it. But in your sense, you're very familiar with the report. You think there is any value to share those recommendations and with the board?
I certainly would not present myself as an expert on the Draghi report, but I think what I would say and what I take away from it is that for Europe, there is a really central challenge between managing the energy transition and managing their competitive picture. And I think that tension is not a tension that only Europe feels, though I believe Europe feels it quite acutely, having taken a big leadership position on climate and facing a series of other economic and geopolitical points of competition. And I think that the report essentially outlines the tension and a series of paths forward that Europe can take to navigate essentially that tension. And I think that that kind of concept, the pull between what do you want to do on climate and what do you want to do to remain competitive in a marketplace, whether that's at the sector level or at the international level, is I think a really relevant consideration when charting a climate path forward.
The reason why I was intrigued because, as you know, he's not considered a left or right. I mean, Mr. Draghi is sort of a very credible influencer, for lack of a better word, both in Europe and the financial world. So that's why I was kind of intrigued by his report. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Of course. Karen?
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I think I need to ask questions that you probably already answered at one time or another, but I just wanted to get something clear in my mind that the net zero portfolio emission strategy is for CalSTRS, correct? It's not anybody else's. It's our net zero plan, right?
The net zero pledge, yes, that is CalSTRS plan.
That's CalSTRS pledge to do that. And so it just kind of seems like that's a lot to do for CalSTRS, right? To do the whole thing by ourselves. So is CalSTRS working with other global organizations to kind of help us, lead us in that way, to help us try to figure out the best approaches to take? You probably already said it, but I'm not sure that I understand that. So can you talk about that a little bit?
I think that the short answer is yes. I mean, from the time we thought about making the pledge to building the pledge to now executing strategies on the pledge, we've been looking to leverage our partners, managers, peers, data service providers. I mean, we want to be collaborative. And when we engage, we work with other investors. It's very much looking to leverage existing knowledge, existing expertise, work collaboratively with other people, and certainly not try to do this all by ourselves.
Yeah, because in the write-up, you talk about the different asset classes and the different case studies that you work with. But to me, it seems like those are the different organizations and corporations that you're working with. But I'm talking about bigger global organizations like, I don't know, maybe Climate 100 or the other big organizations. Then how are we working with them, or just kind of coordinating your efforts so that everybody's not doing the different things, but when you could all work together to make one big thing. So
Before you respond, Ms. Gallegos wants a point of clarification.
Okay.
So if you could, Ms.
Maybe we, just to level set, when we have our net zero targets, it's on what we can control, right?
Right.
It's on our building and the managers, the assets that we invest in. Yeah. And that is just hopefully contributing to the rest of the world, whatever their independent net zero goals are.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I.
Thanks, Deb.
That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure if I was thinking
Shall I
right.
just also, I think what we're showing here, this framework was something that we as a staff and with your guidance as well have developed, which we believe is the most appropriate way for CalSTRS to manage the risks and the opportunities. So we came up with this, like, let's have a manage and reduce. Let's think about how we use our influence. Let's think about reinvest in solutions. Let's think about how we share information amongst and skill build amongst the teams to kind of enable this to happen. So this is very bespoke to us. The write-ups that you see per asset class are very specific to what we believe is appropriate for each of the CalSTRS portfolios in each of the CalSTRS asset classes. But in order to achieve these goals, we recognize, well, there are lots of people who are doing really interesting work in helping provide us with the data that we need, or collaborating to improve the way we think about understanding the emissions profile of certain assets. When we think about accelerating and using our influence, yes, that's when we do it through multiple bodies that we believe are aligned to creating a similar positive outcome that will be good, from a fiduciary lens. And then we think about increasing investments in solutions. Again, that is leveraging the partners that we invest with traditionally, both in the CIS portfolio, but again, across the asset classes, to think about how can we do that in a way that makes sense. There's an awful lot that is bespoke to us, but relies on partners, just like we do for any way that we set our and build the investment portfolio to kind of like the quality that we expect it to be.
Okay.
Does that help?
Kind of. I'm just thinking like bigger companies, like as I mentioned, Climate 100. Do you have liaisons between CalSTRS and those kind of big companies that are making headways or, in successes bigger than our portfolio?
So specific to
that's
Climate
a good
Action
question.
100, I mean, that's the advantage of being part
Right.
of an organization like that. It's sort of sharing the responsibility.
Okay.
There are 30 companies that are being focused on, and CalSTRS engages on a small number of that. But we do have representatives that are part of the broader
Okay.
group, and we do speak periodically, and we do share. So we're sort of able to be part of a broader group that's really engaging over 100 companies, but only really having to use the resources to engage a small number.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I understand that now. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, seeing no other questions, just anything else from the team there? Super high level, just to keep it simple for me, this is an initiative that's based in our fiduciary duties and responsibilities of looking at a macro level trend that we believe will affect energy across the globe over the next multiple decades. And as an allocator of capital, we have to manage risks and look for returns. And everything we do in this presentation and across this organization is built on decisions on risk and return on investments to meet the pension promise. And that's kind of how I look at this. Otherwise, it's just above my pay grade, and I'm not too I'm not as smart as all of you, but that's really what this is about. This is why we're doing this, and this is why we're advancing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next report presentation. Any members of the public that would like to speak to the last item?
No members of the public in queue.
Thanks, Samantha. Sarah and Lachey, Aisha. This is an information item. Item number 4. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome, Lachey. Welcome, Aisha.
All right.
And Alan, during any of these presentations, feel free to weigh in from Makita's view on any of these topics. Okay? Thanks, Alan.
Good afternoon. I'm Aisha Mastagni, Senior Portfolio Manager with the Sustainable Investment and Stewardship Strategies Unit. And I'm happy to be here to give you an update on the diversity in the management of investments. This is our annual update. So I'm just going to start off, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. Whoops. All right. So I know I don't have to tell many of you this, but there is value. We really think there's a value in the diversity in the management of investments. And we know that strong DEI practices are linked to better risk management and linked to long-term value creation. Having diverse perspectives is really critical in the investment office because it leads to better decision-making and adaptability in a challenging environment. And the last point I want to make is that, you can have all the diverse perspectives in the room, but if they're not heard, you don't really have that inclusivity. And we want the best ideas to win. And those ideas can come from anywhere or anyone. And so it's making sure that those ideas are heard is really, really important and critical to our strategy. I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Hi, Sarah Maley, Portfolio Manager, Strategic Investments Team. Good to be here today with all of you. I'd like to give you a quick overview of how diversity in the management of investments, or DIMI as we like to call it, fits into the investments branch. So we've created a governance structure to allow for timely decisions to be made and to ensure that our DIMI initiatives are carried out effectively. So guiding us, we have the Diversity Steering Committee, which is sponsored by Chief Investment Officer Scott Chan and chaired by June Kim, our Senior Investment Director, and includes senior branch leaders. The steering committee meets quarterly, and the group comes together to make decisions on programs, events, and initiatives, and guidance is given to staff on our DIMI strategy. So Lachey and I, along with 2 of our colleagues, Erica Hogans and Haley Reagan, work together to oversee our DIMI efforts on events like Beyond Talk and Catalyst, and internal initiatives such as our DIMI work plan, which Lachey will talk about shortly. For branch-wide collaboration, we have the diversity team. This team is made up of staff from all divisions within investments, and they come together quarterly also to strategize, share ideas, and work on specific DIMI projects and initiatives. So in addition, we partner with Aisha, the CIS team, and our public affairs colleagues to ensure proper messaging and communications are delivered regarding our efforts. So an example of our communications is our DIMI annual report, which was included in the agenda item, and hopefully you've all taken a look at. And this report highlights our accomplishments, and as well as includes the AB 890 information, which requires us to disclose the assets under management by emerging and diverse managers within our portfolio. So finally, we coordinate with the human resources, legal, and the broader organization to ensure that we are in alignment, aware of, and collaborating on our DE&I efforts. So as you can see, we have a very robust structure in place. We've added more resources, and we remain committed to our DIMI program. So now I'll turn it over to Lachey.
Thank you. Hi, Lachey Badalita, CalSTRS Investments Diversity Officer. So on this slide, I'm here to provide a quick overview of our DIMI strategy, which consists of 3 pillars. So under the governance and oversight of our SMT team, senior management team, and our diversity steerco, we have strategically evolved our strategy to date. The first pillar of our DEMI strategy is our staff, which is we prioritize our staff recruitment, development, and retention, as we believe that diversity adds value and innovation, as Aisha mentioned. And also to note that because our AUM is approximately 50% managed in-house, this is very important for us to successfully support our fiduciary responsibility. The second acronym is E for engagement. This is where we attempt to have an influence within the industry by way of the many events that we host, but also our company engagement efforts, which Aisha will provide some examples of those efforts going forward. And then lastly, A stands for allocation. This is where we focus on engaging and investing with our emerging and diverse managers within our portfolio. Those managers specifically meet our risk and return objectives. Now I'll hand it over to Aisha to provide some examples of successful accomplishments in 2024.
All right, so first off, just on the first pillar in regards to staff, we're committed to recruiting and retaining talent that brings a variety of points of view and life experiences, whether that be seasoned professionals, we just said congratulations to 2 retirees, or that means new to the industry. And so we have internal programs like the intern program, the summer intern program, and succession plans that are in place to ensure that we can uphold this pillar. The second piece is on engagement. Beyond Talk was already mentioned. I know many of you are aware of the event we have next week, Catalyst, that we're partnering with CalPERS. And I want to just talk a little bit more about our portfolio company engagement, because this continues to be a very hot topic of discussion. I want to confirm that, we still vote for more diverse boards because we know they make better decisions. That's core to our corporate governance principles, and we're continuing to execute on that. We're also carefully tracking the DEI rollbacks that we're seeing in the headlines, but we're having private discussions with these companies, and we're tracking and trying to confirm what they're telling us in those private meetings. But there's definitely more to come on that as we work through proxy season, because we're hearing different things in those private meetings, and we want to try to confirm what they're telling us. I do want to point to what I think is a bright data point that's out there right now. Well, I should say this. There are several anti-ESG proposals out there. There are proposals that are specifically asking companies to abolish their DEI programs. And what I mean by a positive or a bright light is that these proposals are getting single-digit support. That means that the management's not supporting it, it means investors aren't supporting it, and ultimately it means that the company doesn't think that that would be the best for their business. So for example, Apple had one of these proposals on their ballot recently. It got 2.3% support. And so I just think that that demonstrates, for all the headlines that are out there, I think this is a good data point to demonstrate that people are trying to sort through all the rhetoric that is out there. And then last but not least, I just wanted to touch on the emerging and diverse manager of investments. We really try to partner with managers that meet our risk return objectives. We want managers that generate alpha, but also have a high potential for success, because that actually helps benefit CalSTRS in terms of having access to the next generation of managers and having access to new talent. Last but not least, over to you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so the DEMI work plan is an origin that started approximately 2023, 2024, where we explored learning best practices within the industry. So as you may recall, as the investment committee, we had a few investment practitioners as well as leaders in this space to provide an education of best practices. And so with that information, we developed a work plan that encompasses 3 core themes. The first is data collection. This is in regards to developing or exploring technology that will allow us to collect data, assess it efficiently, and also support any strategic decisions that we would like to pursue going forward. The second item is talent management. Again, this is addressing our team, how we would like to pursue mentorship programs as well as growth opportunities for them to perhaps move up and contribute more, and as Aisha said, be more innovative and comfortable speaking in meetings to provide some content towards our strategic decisions. And then lastly is our partnership enhancement. So this is in regards to all of the external relationships that we have currently, and we really want to develop an engagement framework that will allow us to learn more of what they're doing in the space of DIMI and ensure that there's some set of an alignment or a manager expectations as well. So in closing, I would say that again, all of the initiatives are complementary to our existing DIMI strategy and what we're working on. It also, in some, allows us to support better strategic decision-making across the board. In closing, I would say that DIMI, again, adds value as it contributes to our fiduciary responsibility. We have established an efficient and collaborative governance structure to ensure the success of DIMI. And lastly, we continue to learn, assess, and implement initiatives to support DIMI and also evolve over time. And then lastly, I do want to give another plug for the Catalyst event that will take place next week. So we do appreciate your support and guidance in regards to our DIMI strategy. And with that, I'll open it for questions. Thank you.
Karen, and then Steve, and then Frank. Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everybody, Aisha, Lachey, and Sarah. One of the things that I noticed in the report is that there's a reference to AB 890 and the fact that it's going to sunset. So what does that mean for this program? And what are some things that are being done to kind of enhance it? Or if it does go away, what happens? That kind of thing?
Sure, and thank you for the question. That is correct. The AB 890 does sunset as of January 1st, to be exact, in 2028. As part of the DIMI work plan that we have noted here, we are continuously assessing our reporting, our communication to various stakeholders. And so we will continue to report and communicate that information.
And Karen, I'm just going to add that AB 890 is just a small part. The DIMI strategy is something that we developed for CalSTRS,
right.
And that's just a reporting function.
Okay.
So just because that sunsets, that would not affect the pillars that we've established here.
Okay, and you would still report to the board?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, Steve?
My turn? Well, first of all, I want to do a shout out to Costco, just because I'm a big Costco shopper, and I just have read in the headlines consistently how they're sort of keeping the whatever movement exists, anti-DEI, at bay. So my question really revolves, is there anything that we can do in terms of recognizing the good actors? I mean, I know we're repelling the bad actors, but can we do anything to those companies like Costco who are standing up to say, right on, keep it going, that type of thing?
Yeah, so Steve, Costco was one of those companies that also got one of those shareholder proposals, and it got very little support as well. The stewardship team has acknowledged a lot of those companies that have stayed committed to the diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, mainly because we wanted to make sure that they weren't only hearing from those that oppose these types of programs and practices. We wanted to make sure that we were on record noting that this was good for business, good for their company, and ultimately good for our beneficiaries.
Just to Mr. Juarez's point, Tony James happens to be the chairman of the board at Costco, and he was asked specifically about this. And he said, we didn't ask for the attention. We've been doing this for decades because it's good business, bottom line. And he said, we don't want the attention. We're doing it because it's good business, it's good for our shareholders, it's good for our bottom line. But I would concur with Steve's comments. I do think where we can, and we should, acknowledge the best actors that are aligned with our values, our principles, but most importantly, on returns and risk adjustment. And if that's a letter that's written on behalf of us, I think that the staff working with general counsel can see where it would be appropriate, but always lined up with, you're doing great, but the returns are terrible. No, we're not interested in that. The returns are great, and by the way, you're doing the right thing. And that it's proven to be good for business. And I think that should be documented, and we should celebrate that. And sometimes these companies don't want the attention, and Costco was one of them. It was a good interview. He said, we've been doing it for years, and we do it because it's good business.
And Harry, I think you'd see this too. I know I keep bringing up the proposals, but management isn't supporting these proposals, and there's been a lot of companies that have made some very positive remarks about why these programs add value not only to better human capital management, why it's better for their customers, why it's better for their companies overall. And so some of those companies, I have countless examples where we could demonstrate that.
So if we could just reflect that at some point we want some check back in terms of if there's a way in which we can acknowledge formally these good actors that are
and we've already sent private letters to companies.
Generating the returns provides value from a fiduciary perspective. Okay, so thanks for putting that, Scott, so it doesn't fall through. Frank and Frank and then Deborah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. One regarding engagement, but I'll get to that in a second. AB 890, since it was brought up, there's nothing to prevent that legislation after sunset to be reintroduced or be extended. But that's something I think for our ledge folks to, think about, or the legislator for that matter. So anyways, that's about 890. With respect to engagement, what are the next steps in building an engagement framework that foster a two-way accountability between CalSTRS and its investment partners?
So you're talking about investment managers, Frank, or with our portfolio companies? Just so clear.
Both. I mean, is there a next step? We're thinking what might be some of the next steps that we are thinking about or considering.
Yeah. So I think on the portfolio companies now, we have a very robust engagement program now. We're going to a lot of what I'll call investor conferences, not just governance or stewardship. And we're meeting with C-suite level individuals, and we're asking them questions about their human capital management, how they're investing in their employees. And so we're getting a lot of information through those meetings. I think that the other thing we're trying to do is, based on the headlines, we're trying to sort through what was in the headline, what did the company tell us in that private meeting, and then how can we verify or confirm that information? Because what we're hearing from companies is that, yes, they're changing the words that they're using. Maybe they're not contributing to as many charitable organizations or programs, but they still believe in robust programs for their people. And so we're going through that process now of trying to verify that. So that's really the next step. I think in terms of our investment managers, this is where some of the work we did last year in terms of education and trying to understand what the best practices are. I think that under the work plan in terms of data collection and partnership enhancement, that's where you're going to see that play out.
And I know you mentioned, those investment conferences, which some of our board, my colleagues, occasionally we attend. I don't know whether there is any value of coordinating or you even pointing out to us what were some of these opportunities, for board members to enhance or complement, that engagement, something to think about.
No, and I think that's a good point, Frank, because Lynn Paquin and Reka Vitalia on our team are going to a consumer staples investor conference, and a lot of companies that have been under attack are consumer-facing companies, and so I have a feeling that this will be a topic of discussion at that conference.
Okay, great. My second quick question is about how are we measuring the success of DME beyond activity reporting? For example, in terms of risk mitigation, innovation, financial outperformance, or all the above. Any thoughts on that?
Go ahead. Let me do. Okay. So I think there's a variety of things, Frank. I think, there's countless academic studies and evidence that shows you need to have a diverse team. They make better decisions. It adds long-term value. That might be difficult to quantify. I think where we have seen a lot of progress, although it's not been as probably fast moving as we would like, is you do see boards becoming more diverse. You do see the gender makeup of boards increasing over time. So that's continuing. Like I said, has it moved as fast as we would like? Absolutely not. But the number of companies that are, all male white boards has decreased dramatically over the last few years.
And maybe I'll just say a few words too, because I think Aisha said it right. It's actually very difficult to quantify. But one of the things that I look at is more and more of what we're trying to do, Frank, is bring assets in-house to manage them at lower cost, higher returns, and hopefully, greater risk mitigation. If you looked at the reports, more than half of what we do now is internal. And as we accelerated this program, and we have a diverse staff, I'll say you've seen the reports, but 55% identify as ethnically diverse, 48% female. But as you know, as we've done that, as we've internally managed more and more, leveraged our partnerships to do the same thing, we saved over $2 billion in fees, and we've generated quite a bit of additional returns. So I think that gives some evidence, but again, it's hard to directly say, X to Y to Z.
And I certainly understand that, and it's a valid point. But sometimes, to those non-believers, not that it makes any difference, I'm not sure. But no, really, I mean, probably not. But maybe another word rather than say quantify is measurable outcomes. And I think the one that you just mentioned, it's perfect. What measurable outcomes have resulted, from CalSTR's engagement efforts to elevate diversity? I think that's an important point, to make. So, but thank you for the report. Thank you for all the work that the treasurer really appreciates, by the way, and she's a big believer in this efforts, and she commends you for the great work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Deborah.
I'd like to.
Yes.
Can I add?
Yeah, please.
I think it's important to emphasize in answering your question that it's really long-term value creation. So some of the results you won't see right away. But the studies that I know that your investment professionals look at demonstrate that there's value creation through diversity. But for you as a long-term investor, this is really a long game. And so you're trying to ensure that your portfolio companies are really following the right path to increase their value or stay competitive. So again, I think these measurements might be a little bit more long-term.
Deborah? Thank you, Brian, Mr. Bartow. Thank you, sir.
So I just want to follow up on that because I think we're squandering an opportunity here, given the interaction that you have with these companies and the data you're collecting now and the publicly available information you can collect. We can look at ENPS scores, attrition, productivity, board representation, leadership, and track all that. We can start now. We've got the data. We've got access to the data, and we can start tracking it. so that we can see the correlations that start to exist with those that have chosen to abandon their programs and those who have not abandoned their programs. So I would encourage staff to start tracking this hard data. We've got access to it. We can ask the questions, and then we will have empirical data that is unarguable later.
Thank you for that, Deborah, because I think that the data's not perfect, but it's one of the reasons we also advocate for better disclosures from our companies about their human capital management practices. So we sort of think of it, we're engaging company by company and asking them for better disclosure, but we're also trying to advocate for better disclosures at the regulatory level too, because then it's helpful, because then we can look from company to company to company and track it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Ken.
I'm not sure if this question has been asked earlier or not, because I stepped out to the restroom for a little bit. But how is the current administration and the things that are being put out there affecting companies and their decisions about whether to proceed ahead or not? You know, we would love to have a whole bunch of like Costco and says, the heck with this, we're going to go continue doing it because it's good practices, it's good business. How is that affecting us, and how is that is affecting other company as you're seeing it?
Yeah. So I think that's a really good point, Ken. And what we're seeing is the consumer-facing companies are being targeted, and many of them, in the private conversations we're having, they are changing the words that they use and the language. But, you know, once again, we need to confirm, you know, that what they're telling us privately is actually being put into place. I think the other sort of bucket of companies that are really affected by this are those that receive federal funding. And I think those are the companies that are not only changing the words, but they're just very, very nervous about talking about these things. And so while they tell us privately that they recognize this is still good for their business, they are very nervous about getting blowback from the administration.
Well, I don't see anyone else in the queue. I want to thank the team for the report. Thank my colleagues for your questions. And I know we have done a lot in this space, and we're going to stay committed to it because we think it's, as Brian said, it creates long-term value. And I think, as you said, Aisha, we want everyone to be welcomed in the room because the best ideas can come from anyone. And I think that's super, super important. And I would just, here in California, you know, we do a lot of stuff with the interns. We do the intern program. We've got a great business school at Stanford. We have a great business school at UCLA. There's USC. There are colleges, HB, historically black colleges and universities across this country that I'm just curious. I have no idea whether or not it's a good idea. It's an idea that we can pursue. But learning if there are opportunities for us to build relationships with some of the HBCUs, simply because I think African-American men in particular are still way underrepresented in the financial service industry. And potentially, you know, that could be a place where we begin to identify individuals that are interested in the financial service industries, where we can actually brand ourselves as a great place to work, make a difference, be in financial services industry, and identify future leaders. So I don't know if it's a good idea, I don't know if it's worth pursuing, but I just wanted to put on the record that I think it's, if we want to continue to grow in the space and identify the best talent for the future, that best talent may or may not be at UCLA or Stanford or Sacramento, but they might, you know, we might find some great talent and they don't know about CalSTRS.
Actually, I'm really pleased that you brought that up. That's an opportunity that we're exploring under the talent management within the work plan. So yes, the HBCU as well as colleges that are on the East Coast. We tend to get a lot of interest from schools that are within California, but we're also interested in forming partnerships with women-only universities as well.
I think it's terrific, and I just, in a conversation I with someone recently, he and his wife are one of the biggest contributors to the HBCUs, and they look like me, but they're committed to really supporting the colleges and the universities, and because anyway, so I'm glad you're looking into it, and I'm excited about the future, and really committed we are to identifying the best talent, because the best talent can come from anywhere, and you're only as good as your people. So thank you so much. Yeah. Pleasure of the board. Continue to go. Keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes, Madam Chair. All right. Shared vision. Yes. Any public comments?
No public comment for this item.
Thanks, Samantha. Thank you, Brian. Scott, can you introduce the team and kick it off for us?
Yeah, let me kick it off. This is, I'm very excited about the Shared Vision Project. It was one of the first initiatives that I launched as the new CIO with the investment committee. I am going to make a suggestion, though. I recommend that Part B of this, the technology strategy, we defer to the July offsite, because we're a bit behind schedule, and I think that's an area we can defer.
Good idea.
Good idea? Okay, let's go for that.
Thanks, Scott.
Well, in describing the, let me see, is this the right slide? No? Oh, okay. Well, in describing the investment vision in one sentence, it's to become a top global allocator. So our vision to become a top global allocator is focused on the future. And many people, you might argue, today we are a top global allocator, but a vision is about the future. Why? Two reasons. Number one, market dynamics. We talked a lot about the shifting dynamics of the market. And secondly, our competition is also getting better and better. So just because we lead in some areas today doesn't mean we'll be guaranteed that in the future. And the Shared Vision Project seeks to answer that simple question: what areas do we need to build and lead or maintain today to continue to fulfill our mission and continue to achieve our goals far into the future? So I'm engaging all of the staff to help answer that question. I'm also going to be engaging with you, each of you individually. I'll try to get your input and meet one-on-one with you. And I think it's going to be key that we lead in the most important areas. And so I welcome your input. The second important element is that it is anchored and rooted in our mission and goals. So our mission to secure the retirement future of over 1 million teachers, our goal to meet or exceed that 7% and beat our benchmarks. Our vision to become a top global allocator must lead us to fulfilling our mission and achieving our goals in a better way. And finally, I just wanted to mention that this is a project, it's a branch-wide initiative lasting 18 to 24 months. It's part of the investment committee work plan, where it's going to lead up to the investment staff making a recommendation of the vision and strategy to this investment committee. Hopefully, we'll have you approve it at that time, but we'll all be part of this journey together. So today we have 3 examples, actually 2 examples because we deferred one, of our Shared Vision project, including mainly the divisional reviews that we've been doing across the entire branch. So in this item, April has completed a review of our investment services division, and she's very excited to share those results with you. I'm not going to spoil the punchline, but I think it's really an example of where we need to invest and build for the future. And she'll get into that. Hopefully we can talk more. And then in item 7, the next item, SIS has completed a divisional review, and they've decided to graduate the sustainable public equity portfolio, move it to the global equity portfolio. So that's a first reading of a policy revision. But those are the 2 examples today. So with that being said, April.
Thank you. April Wilcox, Director of Investment Services, and I'm joined here with Tony Martinez. He is a partner and head of Mercer Sentinel Group, and we've engaged with Mercer to do this review of the operational risk. They came in and they looked at the current and future infrastructure of all of the functions within investment services, looked at all of the operational risk, and also did a peer benchmarking. And so they're going to share some of the assessments of their results. So no action required today, but there will likely be some resource asks in the future at a future meeting. So before I pass it off to Tony, I want to just highlight a few things about what we do in investment services, because we do have some new board members. And so you may hear Scott mention from time to time that we are the backbone of the investment branch. So yeah, just like a spine is the infrastructure of a body, we provide infrastructure and support of all investment strategies across all asset classes. So we're comprised of 5 divisions, but we really work together and collaboratively as one complex hub that does a lot of different functions. I'm not going to go over all the different functions, but I do want you to remember 3 things that I feel are the most important that we do, which is protect, execute, and service. And I'll just briefly go over those. So the first one, which I feel is the most important thing we do, is really protecting the assets through risk management and through oversight. And so we provide oversight of critical risks such as operational, custodial, valuation, regulatory, counterparty, conflicts of interest, and there's a slew of others. And so we, in every single function that we perform, we make sure that there are controls in place, and there are no trade instructions that leave our internal branch without going through us first. And I like to share, just to put in perspective the importance. Last year, the SEC filed over 600 actions and $8 billion in penalties to financial institutions, and that's their highest in history. And the number keeps going up, and that's 1 year. And if you review those, which my team does, review a lot of them, almost all of those could be mitigated through strong governance control. So that is one of the most important things that we do. The second one, with executing, we implement all new investment strategies across all investment types. And this is a complex process because we have to understand the unique differences between every single one to ensure the structure is set up right, the valuation is right, and the monitoring is done right. I have this really awesome graphic that explains the whole process, but I saved time and didn't throw it in here, but it is very complex, and especially when you get into the private assets. And then the third thing, in addition to executing, we service the entire life cycle of the investments, from being brought in with the investment divisions to the early due diligence process, trade management, performance attribution, and all the way through. We are part of that process. And to throw out some numbers for perspective, we settle over 15,000 trades a month, and we reconcile every single position over 70 internally managed portfolios every single day. So that just gives you a flavor of some of the volume that we do. So quickly before I pass it off to Tony, why is this important now? Because it sounds like we're doing everything right. But really, the complexities over the last couple of years of the collaborative model and bringing those in, and in addition to the industry becoming more complex, investment structures becoming more complex, you hear that we're owning more things like operating companies and our own LLCs and revenue sharing and these types of things. We need to make sure that we're set up in the future to where we can provide this high-level risk oversight and quality work that we do today. We can't control financial markets, but one of the things we can do is control when and how we execute. And the speed at which we're able to execute is often the things that helps tip the scales and give us a competitive advantage. So I'm going to pass it off to Tony. He's going to go over a little bit about their scope and then go over the areas that he has identified.
Thank you, April. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's both an honor and privilege to be here to present the work that Mercer did on behalf of CalSTRS. Before we do, I just want to reintroduce who Mercer and Mercer Sentinel is specifically. Mercer Sentinel is a specialist group within Mercer that focuses exclusively on investment operations. Sentinel advises clients on governance structures, operational best practices, and investment operations strategy. Really, really important, critical things to maintain service continuum as your business evolves. At Mercer, we're recognized as a leader in investment consulting. We work with thousands of clients worldwide and have a track record of over 75 years helping sophisticated global investors achieve success. So I think between both those counterparts, we were well positioned to support April and her team through this engagement. Here at Mercer Sentinel, we took our consulting framework and applied it to the investment services division. We just heard April talk about, I think, the brevity of everything her team is responsible for. Very critical, high volume, and agree, early onset, they are doing everything well right now. But the backdrop of the world is changing very quickly as opportunities, challenges, and risks are evolving just as quickly. The investment framework on the screen above is really the diagnostic we put the investment services team through, covering items such as governance, regulation compliance, all processes and controls, human capital, aka the people doing the jobs, as well as technology and what happens when things go wrong in terms of business continuity. To really complement this work we did, we also conducted, as April mentioned, a peer exercise, and we surveyed 8 institutional investors. This was a curated list of investors with similar size, scope, breadth, and similar direction of travel where CalSTRS is heading. So we thought this was a good population to really ensure our advice was fit for purpose and had a global perspective and ensure that our recommendations align CalSTRS what industry best standards and competitors and colleagues are doing as well. Our feedback was conducted through written surveys and virtual interviews with these peers. Our assessment highlighted several key areas of strengths relative to our review and industry best practices, as well as enhancement opportunities to further solidify all the work being done in the investment services division. And I'll go over those shortly. Let me give you the headline preview. There were no red flags or high-risk items as we performed that diagnostic with the team. The team is performing this job exceptionally well. The point I really want to make is, as April mentioned, the transition to the collaborative model and the backdrop, the team is tasked with a lot to do, and they are working at capacity. So a lot of our recommendations and enhancement opportunities is really to robust that support over those critical functions that April just walked through. Particularly that you're not just staying here, right? You are considered a leader in your space. These recommendations are going to really help position CalSTRS to maintain that leadership edge and be considered a leader in the future. It's also important because you want to deliver the same service and risk mitigation that you're providing to your constituents today. As a public organization, I can't highlight enough how important that is, that what you're doing, mistakes, you heard about the errors, the losses that could happen, very public and very visible to your constituents. So oversight of investments is incredibly important. So let's start with the strengths that we identified as part of our review. We identified strong internal controls, governance, and processes across all teams within investment services. There's a strong culture of ethics, which is highly valuable in providing these oversight functions. We also noted strong core operational compliance and performance capabilities. You heard of the volume of trades and everything that April just talked about. Those are really, really critical core functions. The job is being done very well. But the complexity of investments, particularly in private assets, I think warrants a little bit more consideration and support. Another area we wanted to highlight is the expertise and the agility of the team. In a rapidly changing backdrop, research, the ability to implement these new investments and to really support the investment teams in terms of what they want to do is critical. They are able to support the change and complexity, but again, they're at capacity. And to maintain that level of support and service, some enhancement recommendations have been made. So moving over to areas of enhancements. Again, the team is doing these already, but the complexity, we've identified several key themes that need a little bit more investment and growth. We noted opportunities for structural enhancements in order to ensure continued strong governance and effective oversight. These included adding additional management and oversight positions, and included some organizational structure design to further build out some functions that we think are very, very important, particularly with the private investment. We noted that in addition to operational risk, functions that the team performed, it is crucial in an investment fund because even the best investment ideas could be derailed by a mistake or error. And as you can see from April in the statistics, that opportunity is increasing. The opportunity for mistakes is increasing due to that complexity. So this is really important. Dedicated operational risk management safeguards not only protect your assets, but your reputation and stakeholder confidence. Really, really important things for a sophisticated public organization as yourself. With increased complexity, we've highlighted the need to expand the operational risk functions, both internally and in partnering with the investment divisions. In addition to operational risk, we highlighted some functions to expand specific to the private asset complexity. There's an opportunity to enhance the collaboration and expertise around this area that involve complex investment setups, valuation oversight, conflicts of interest, compliance, and regulatory requirements, which are very important within private markets. Finally, we've outlined the technology and analytics as the future growth area of the organization. Investment strategies are becoming more sophisticated and data-driven, as we heard through much of this board session today. Robust technology and analytic capabilities are no longer optional for organizations such as yourself. They're a must-have. Investing in this area will enable you to make more informed investment decisions, respond more quickly to market challenges, and ultimately deliver better risk-adjusted returns. I know technology is such an important initiative, and I know we've delayed that for another session today, and I think it warrants that time and discussion because I do think that's a key for your future. I'll pause here now to see if there's any questions.
Let me close up real quick just to say, thank you. Let me close up real quick just to say, in addition to us going over, or me going over the technology strategy at the July offsite, the next step is Scott and I are going to be working with Mercer to develop a multi-year plan. This isn't something that happens overnight. We want to be very thoughtful. We need to look at balancing the operational risk with costs. So that will be the next step that we'll do as a takeaway.
Steve, Alan, anything you want to comment to this report? Okay. Any questions from the committee? Thank you for the information. We look forward to the continued education and update at the offsite around the technology needs, costs, et cetera. Thank you. So item 7 is a first reading of the CIS investment policy revision, and then item 8 is also a policy first reading.
What are they coming up? Would you like?
Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to the item 6?
There are no members in the queue.
Thanks. So this is an information item, first reading, and I would, for the record, note that there's an accompanying memo from Makita supporting the proposed first reading, which gives me comfort if it's a desire of the committee to adopt this after the presentation, or if there are a series of questions, we can bring it back as a second reading. Steve?
Yeah, coming back to the board, I'm not familiar with why we do first readings versus second readings. Are we trying to give more time for introspection on our part, for the public comment? Yeah. Because if we're going to move on this one to dispense with it today, I'm just wondering why we even bother with the second reading for anything.
Oh, well, that's a great question, and that's why we asked that there's an accompanying memo. So if there is an accompanying memo, historically, we're in a position where we can say that the expert advice supports the changes, but sometimes there are a myriad of questions that need to be thought through and brought back to the committee. That's historically how we've done it, but certainly open to being more efficient.
Yeah, did we get an accompanying memo, is what you're saying?
Yeah, there is. It's in the memo. And I'll ask, after the staff presentation, I'll ask Steve and Alan for, on the record, make some comments summarizing the memo. Okay, Kirsty and David?
Yeah, great, thank you. Hello again, Kirsty Jenkinson, Director of Sustainable Investment and Stewardship Strategies. And
hi, everybody. David Murphy, Director of Global Equity.
great. So this item, as you'll have seen in your materials, it is a recommendation to revise the SIS. You know, SIS is our acronym for Sustainable Investment and Stewardship Strategies policy. And it's as a result of the review of the activities that we're conducting in line with the Shared Vision project that you just obviously heard about from Scott and from April. And you heard about from RMS earlier in the year as well. Let me explain the bit of the policy that we're asking for a revision to with this picture that you see, hopefully. The SIS policy has multiple different areas, and this is what this tries to break down. It has the stewardship policy, which you'll see on the left-hand side, which obviously governs our stewardship activities and how we think to use our influence to create, value creating in the broader markets. And on the right-hand side, you see the SIS portfolio policy. Traditionally, in the past, it has been split between a public portfolio policy and a private portfolio policy. What we are recommending today, that the time is now right for the SIS public portfolio, the active equity public portfolio on the left-hand side in the red there, it is time for that to graduate into the global equity portfolio, hence why David is with me as well and is going to make a few comments as to why we both believe that this is the right thing to do for the fund and for the resources that we have focused on this area. Going forward, what this will mean is that the SIS portfolio will remain focused on private assets investments, and the name of that portfolio will just be the SIS portfolio, and the SIS portfolio will be focused on private investments. So it doesn't need to be called the SIS private portfolio going forward. So there's a bit of nomenclature and there's a little bit of shifting going on there. So let me spend a bit of time beyond the recommendation on why we think mutually that this is the right decision from an internal perspective. And as I think you alluded to, Chair Keeley, Makita concurs as well. First, this shift is going to continue to align our public equity investments with our seventh investment belief that we need to consider materially financial sustainability factors in the management of investments. That stays the same, nothing changes there as a result of this shift. Secondly, and I think this is really important as we look at all the activities that we are following as a branch and where we spend our time and our focus, we think it's going to be a much better use of our resources. The SIS investment team, including those who were previously focused on our public asset management, will now be devoted to expanding our investments in climate solutions in the private asset classes across a wide risk return spectrum from venture to infrastructure, and also supporting other SIS priorities. As I think you know from our previous discussions with you, the opportunities we're seeing in that part of the portfolio, the private portfolio, are exponentially increasing, and our allocation to those strategies is increasing as well. So it will allow the team to focus on this growth. The global equity team will continue to do what they do so well, which is obviously specializing in managing global equity strategies. As you know, the majority of these strategies are passively managed, but they also, as David knows much better than I do, will manage and continue to manage a smaller but also important active equity book. And the SIS public portfolio is being integrated into that active equity book as well. The third reason we think this is really important is it's going to continue to help us collaborate across our asset classes in support of our goals and in support of our investment goals as well and our strategic goals. So again, it's really nice to see this sort of increased collaborations between teams that we've been focusing on for a number of years. Finally, just to sort of put a finer point on this as well, we have a precedent in taking these kind of steps and graduating strategies in this way when the time is right. You'll remember that we asked your permission a couple of years ago. We graduated the Low Carbon Target Index, which sat within the SIS portfolio, to global equity, and that team was able to scale that strategy to support our net zero pledge and reduce portfolio emissions, as you heard from in our prior item on the net zero agenda item, and in line with our risk budgets. It's important to note that what this doesn't do is it doesn't require any adjustments to the global equity policy. And it doesn't require any adjustments to our total public equity risk budget that you also oversee. So David's not here to discuss any of that, but we did think it would be nice for David to come up here as well, as we've been obviously doing this together, to kind of share some market observations about his view on why this also makes sense and why it supports this recommendation. So David, over to you.
Next slide.
Yes.
Thank you, Kirsty. I want to take a few minutes to just talk about the market observations that you have on the right part of the screen here. You know, the first one that you see is relatively straightforward. I mean, we've seen a considerable increase in the number of sustainability-focused equity strategies, especially over the last 5 years. Second, we've really, witnessed a convergence of traditional managers with the sustainable focused managers. And if you really look at the traditional managers 20 years ago, there were probably only a handful of active managers that truly integrated sustainability in their investment process. Now, it's a common practice with most of the large, high-quality managers. And because of this, we were really seeing an overlap in the managers we had in our portfolio and the managers that CIS were looking to either fund or that were in their portfolio, which really leads us to this third observation. The more global equity and CIS work together, around our shared goals, which, primarily managing the risk budget, supporting the net zero strategy, and just working with our external partners, the more we realize the extent of that overlap. And it just made us question whether we really needed two teams performing essentially the same tasks. So in alignment with our shared vision project, I'm really pleased with how we collaborated on developing this recommendation and how it will, one, help optimize our use of resources, and then secondly, set up both teams for future value creation and success. But before we finish the presentation, I really want to thank some people that were involved with this effort. On the global equity team, Misty Watson, Sharon Joe, and Wayne Yim. And then from CIS, Nick Abel, Doug Chen, and Joachim Malberg. They worked together amazingly well, collaborating on this idea, and it just worked out really well. That is the end of the presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Kirsty. Steve,
Steve McCourt, Makita, as was alluded to, we have a memo in your packet that supports the policy change. I'll just highlight a couple of items. This policy change really doesn't change at all how CalSTRS is invested. It's really just who is investing the capital at CalSTRS. And so it's not a significant or material change that you're often approached with on policy. And the other piece of context I would highlight is there was a lot of work well before this moment between CIS and Global Equity to underwrite the public strategies and to collaborate on sort of a shared vision and approach to those. So I just want to acknowledge a lot of that work that went on that I'm sure made this a smoother transition or contemplated transition to this point. So Makita is supportive of it. At the end of the day, this simply puts global equity portfolios in the global equity asset class, and it makes CIS formally a private markets only area.
Great. Thank you for that summary, Steve, and for the accompanying memo. Deborah?
Yeah, so Steve just answered one of my questions. But to clarify, the graduation will occur, you'll move the strategy to global equity, but will we continue to make similar investments in the global equity portfolio, sourced and diligenced there?
I can address that. This is what I was talking about, the convergence of, again, 20 years ago, if a traditional manager really didn't consider sustainability that much. Now it's blurring the lines. The strategies she was having are basically the same strategies we had funded in our portfolio. And that's when we had the epiphany that, we're doing the same thing here, so we should do a consolidation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Briefly, Alan. Yeah, please.
Effectively, there's no change in substance, there's just a change in form, and just to make it as simple as humanly possible.
Thanks, Al. And then Karen, Denise, Sharon.
I'm just going to move for
Okay. I thought I heard the consultant say it's not material.
We were all just going
Oh, great.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Well, wait a minute.
Ms. Yamamoto.
I just one clarifying thing, okay? Because I look at the deletions and the red lines and the final clean copy, where I know that SIST had private and public, okay? We're taking out the public, moving it to global equities. But then in the clean version, there's no reference to private anymore. Oh, there is? Oh, right. There's no reference to private anymore, so is it inferred that it's private?
Yeah.
Because we took the public out of it?
Well, before, if we just go back to this, if you look at it, it was the public and the private.
Right.
We're now saying there's no need to have that layer below, because what is essentially the CIS portfolio is just a private portfolio. So we're not going to call it the CIS private portfolio.
Right,
We're just going
right,
to call it
okay.
the CIS portfolio, because de facto it's now just going to invest in private assets, and that's what the
Okay.
policy
Because
governs.
in our minds, it is all private and no public because it went to the other side.
Exactly.
To the other, I didn't mean
other
it any
side.
worse. To the other
Yes.
side. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Denise?
So to Steve's point, I don't think we need a second reading on this, so I was going to move the CIS revision policy, revised policy.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Bradford, seconded by Ms. Hendricks. Any further clarifying questions or further discussion? Can we, do we need a roll call? Or can we just take a voice vote?
Yeah, we can just take a voice.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, it's been adopted today unanimously. Thank you.
Great. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
so much, everybody.
Sure, thanks. Okay. The next information item, first reading, is a strategic asset allocation. And this has a little bit more substance to it in terms of what you're asking to do relative to the allocation target. So June?
Good afternoon, members of the Investment Committee. I'm June Kim, your Senior Director of the Total Fund Management Division. I'm joined by Josh Diedisch, who's a Senior Portfolio Manager on the same team. This is an item that's coming before you as a first reading, but it is something that's routinely seen by the board. So it's related to our investment policy statement, which is the umbrella governing document for the branch. And your last asset liability and management study, ALM study, was in 2023, where you adopted the strategic asset allocation targets. We implement that SAA in steps. And for each step, we come back to the investment committee to get it approved as part of the investment policy statement. And so the last time was in 2024 for the second step. And so we're here today with the reading to incorporate the third step. I'm going to hand it to Josh.
Great, thank you. So just to highlight the step that we're recommending based on the plan is a reduction in global equity of 1% and then increasing inflation sensitive by 1%, just consistent with the plan. And we would recommend making that effective July 1st, as we put in the memo. And then just note again that we also included Makita's concurrence memo as part of the item as well. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that great summary and rationale. Steve, for the record, you want to comment on the memo?
Yeah, Steve McCourt, Makita. Makita has a memo in your packet. We consent to the change. What I would simply highlight is the migration to the strategic asset allocation policy is something that this committee reviews at the time of adopting the asset allocation, but the committee asked staff to come back to advise it on when to migrate from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. So this is the third part in that process. As June alluded to, this is the normal part of the process of migrating towards a new asset allocation, and it comes at the appropriate time of making that step as well. So we concur with the changes, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions or entertain a motion to move this?
I'll move.
Okay, it was moved by,
Company memo.
with the accompanying memo. Okay, Mr. Juarez moves it with the accompanying memo. Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Tang. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? It's been adopted and changed. Any public comments?
There is no public comment on this item.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, June. So item 9, 10, and 11 are consent action items. So does anyone want to pull any of those items? Okay. Do we need to vote on those? No, right? They're just consent. Okay. All right. So we're through those. Scott, 12, the input for the work plan. You want to talk a little bit about the work plan and,
Yeah.
that we adopted in 25 and in July and.
Yeah, and I think we had gone into this thinking that both the current projects are multi-year work plan projects. That's the shared vision. I stated maybe 18 to 24 months, and then the private markets priorities. But in between that time, I think we've talked a lot about this concept of portfolio resiliency as maybe an item to think about. And of course, we want to make sure that we have a tight list of work plans, so we wouldn't want to do more than 2. But I think there might be some room for discussion between now and the July offsite where we formalize this. Out of the 3, what's the investment committee thinking?
All right, terrific. So between now and July, there should be conversations, I think with Makita, with your office, as well as vice chair of the committee, about the 2 priorities that we want to adopt for the 25-26 year, and without losing sight on the fact that the issues around private markets are seriously important for us and how we can address and deal with those. Okay? All right. No other questions or comments? Item 13 was review of information requests. Are there any information requests, Scott?
Yes, I captured a few. Regarding item 3B, the committee requested a future discussion on CalSTR's engagement process with high carbon emitters. Regarding item 4, the committee requested staff, where appropriate, recognize positive diversity, equity, and inclusion actors and influencers. Regarding item 4, the committee requested staff track data regarding companies implementing and abandoning diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And regarding item 4, the committee requested staff consider opportunities for CalSTRs to build relationships and partnerships with HBCUs.
Okay.
That sound right?
I believe so, yeah. Brian, anything that needs to else be captured in that, do you think?
I think it was a broader net that included HBCUs. I didn't think it was just exclusively HBCUs.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. 14 is the draft agenda for our next meeting. Anything you want to highlight there, Scott?
It's going to be the semi-annual performance. We'll have another quarter, and I think we'll have a critical quarter to review, as well as look forward. And the other thing I would point to is the review on the total fund management division, which is really an assessment of the risk of the total fund. And so we talked about some of the emerging risks. That's going to be a very, very important discussion, I believe.
Great. Okay. I don't think there's anything else. Any public comments on those items, Samantha?
No public comments.
Okay, great. I believe that brings us to the end of our public portion of the meeting. So it's 4:30. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then it will give us an hour in closed session, total of 1 hour in closed session. We need to adjourn at 5:40. So we'll come back at 4:40 in 10 minutes, and we'll have an hour in closed session. Thank you. In here, yeah. Thank you.